Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. What if I told you that people decide whether to respect you before you even speak, often in the first few seconds, based purely on how you carry your body? No charm, no dominance games, no forced confidence, just silent signals that your posture, eyes, and stillness are already broadcasting every moment you walk into a room. You've felt it before. Two people say the exact same words, yet one commands attention effortlessly while the other gets ignored. It's not luck. It's not genetics. It's body language aligned with inner discipline, the kind the Stoics mastered long before psychology gave it a name. Stoicism was never about being loud or intimidating. It was about calm authority, about presence without performance, about moving in a way that tells the world, I don't need approval and I don't seek permission. When your body reflects that mindset, respect follows naturally, instantly. In this video, you'll learn 8 precise body language moves rooted in Stoic principles that quietly elevate how people see you, without saying a word. These aren't tricks. They're shifts in how you occupy space, express control, and project self-command. Watch until the very end, because the final move ties everything together. And once you apply it, people will feel your presence before you even speak. Number 1. Stillness under pressure. Stillness under pressure is one of the rarest signals of inner authority, and that's exactly why it commands respect without asking for it. When tension rises, most people leak energy. Their bodies rush to react before their minds have even caught up. Shoulders tighten, breathing shortens, movements become noisy, rushed, apologetic, or aggressive. You can feel the loss of control in them. Stillness, on the other hand, does the opposite. It gathers energy inward. It says nothing, yet it communicates everything. I am not threatened. I am not hurried. I am here. Stoicism has always treated this kind of composure as power, not passivity. Wrote, be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved. That image matters. The rock doesn't fight the waves. It doesn't tense against them. It remains rooted. When you cultivate stillness in moments of pressure, your body becomes that rock. Your lack of unnecessary motion unsettles chaos. People instinctively slow down around you. They recalibrate. Respect begins there. What most people misunderstand is that stillness is not freezing. It's not stiffness or fear disguised as calm. True stillness is relaxed alertness. Your spine is neutral. Your breath is steady. Your eyes are present. Nothing is collapsing inward and nothing is flaring outward. This balance is deeply human and deeply commanding. When your body doesn't react impulsively, your mind stays available. You don't scramble for approval or rush to defend. You choose when to move, speak, or act. That choice is visible, and it's magnetic. Pressure exposes habits. When you feel observed, challenged, or judged, your body reveals how well you govern yourself. Stoicism teaches that while you can't control external events, you can always control your response. Epictetus reminded us that disturbance doesn't come from what happens, but from how we interpret it. Stillness is the physical manifestation of that teaching. It's your body saying, I decide what this moment means. And people respect decision makers, even silent ones. To train this, you must start with awareness. Notice how quickly you move when tension appears. The fidgeting, the over-nodding, the rushed gestures. These are not flaws, they're habits, but habits can be rewritten. Begin practicing deliberate pauses. When pressure rises, do less. Let your body settle before your mouth opens. Let your breath deepen before your hands move. This pause feels uncomfortable at first because it interrupts old patterns, but that discomfort is the doorway to authority. A powerful exercise is controlled stillness. Once a day, place yourself in a neutral standing or seated posture and remain deliberately motionless for 1 full minute. Not rigid, relaxed. Breathe slowly through your nose. Let micro-urges to adjust pass without obeying them. This trains your nervous system to tolerate intensity without reacting. Over time, your baseline changes. You stop broadcasting nervous energy. Your presence becomes heavier, calmer, harder to ignore. Another practice is breath anchoring under imagined pressure. Inhale slowly, counting to 4. Exhale for 6. Longer exhales signal safety to the body. Do this while maintaining eye focus and relaxed shoulders. The Stoics understood breath as a regulator of reason. When your breath is steady, your thoughts follow. When your thoughts are steady, your body reflects it. This alignment is what people read as confidence, even when you say nothing. Stillness also sharpens perception. When you're not busy reacting, you see more, you hear more. You notice shifts in tone, timing, and energy. You become responsive rather than reactive. This is why stillness often feels intimidating to others. It removes predictability. They can't rush you. They can't easily manipulate your tempo. Your calm sets the rhythm, and whoever sets the rhythm holds the frame. Seneca warned against being everywhere but within. Stillness brings you back within. It collapses scattered attention into centered presence. When your body is quiet, your mind speaks with clarity. You don't need exaggerated gestures or animated expressions. Economy of movement signals self-trust. It tells others you don't need to perform to be taken seriously. You should also practice stillness after speaking. Most people undo their own authority by filling silence. They rush to explain, justify, soften, resist that impulse. Say what needs to be said, then stop. Let the space breathe. Silence following speech amplifies impact. It shows certainty. It gives your words weight. Trained himself to waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. Stillness after action is the same principle. Act, then remain grounded. Understand this. Respect is often less about what you do and more about what you don't do. You don't rush. You don't fidget. You don't chase reactions. You don't leak anxiety. That restraint reads as strength because it is strength. It's self-mastery made visible. Take this seriously. Begin today. Reduce unnecessary movement. Slow your breath under pressure. Allow silence to exist without trying to conquer it. Train your body to stay calm when your instincts beg you to react. Over time, stillness will no longer be something you perform. It will be something you are. And when that happens, respect doesn't need to be demanded. It arrives quietly, naturally, the way calm always does. After chaos realizes it has no power over you. Number 2, calm, unbroken eye contact. Calm, unbroken eye contact is not about dominance, it's about self-possession. And the moment you understand that, everything changes. Most people look away not because they are polite, but because their mind is restless. Their attention fractures. Their inner world is noisy. The eyes follow the mind. When the mind is scattered, the gaze becomes evasive. When the mind is grounded, the gaze becomes steady without effort. This is why eye contact communicates so much before a single word is spoken. It reveals whether you are present with yourself or negotiating internally for approval. Stoicism teaches that composure begins inside. Wrote, "Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it." Calm eye contact is the physical expression of that inner stillness. You are not trying to impress. You are not trying to intimidate. You are simply there, fully. And people feel that. They may not consciously understand why, but their nervous system registers it immediately. A steady gaze signals safety, confidence, and authority at the same time. That combination is rare, and rarity commands respect. When you hold eye contact without tension, you are communicating that you are not in a hurry to escape the moment. You are not rushing to prove yourself. You are not seeking permission to exist. This quiet certainty unsettles insecurity, not because it's aggressive, but because it's immovable. Epictetus reminded us that no man is free who is not master of himself. The eyes betray self-mastery instantly. A calm gaze says, "I am not ruled by impulse." and that message lands before logic has a chance to interfere. Many people confuse eye contact with starring. Starring is rigid, it's forced, it's fueled by ego. Calm eye contact is relaxed, soft, alive. There is awareness behind it, breath behind it, stillness behind it. You're not locking onto someone, you're meeting them. And that distinction matters. Respect doesn't arise from pressure, it arises from presence. The Stoics never chased reactions, they cultivated inner alignment. Eye contact is simply alignment made visible. If you want to develop this habit, you must begin where Stoicism always begins, with the mind. Before you think about your eyes, settle your breath, slow it down, lengthen the exhale. Let your body receive the signal that there is no threat. When your nervous system relaxes, your gaze naturally steadies. This is not performance, it's regulation. Practice standing or sitting still for a minute each day, breathing calmly, eyes open, attention anchored. You are training your system to tolerate presence without retreat. Another exercise is to notice your impulse to look away. Don't judge it, observe it. Is it boredom, anxiety, the urge to please, the need to avoid discomfort? Stoicism teaches you to separate sensation from reaction. The moment you can notice the impulse without obeying it, you reclaim control. Seneca wrote, "He who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." Looking away prematurely is often a form of unnecessary suffering, an attempt to escape imagined judgment. Stay. Breathe. Let the moment complete itself. Calm eye contact also reflects integrity. When your words and your inner state are aligned, your gaze remains steady effortlessly. When they're not, the eyes dart. This is why cultivating inner honesty matters. Stoicism emphasizes living in accordance with your values, not your fears. Ask yourself daily, am I speaking from truth or from defense? When you operate from truth, your body supports you. Your eyes no longer need to flee. There is power in silence paired with eye contact, not theatrical silence, not performative pauses, but natural stillness. Many people rush to fill space because silence exposes inner noise. When you're comfortable with silence, your presence deepens. Eye contact becomes a container rather than a challenge, and others instinctively rise or fall to meet it. You can train this habit gently. When you feel the urge to glance away, extend the moment by one breath, just one, then another. Over time, your tolerance expands. You are teaching your mind that presence is safe, that you do not disappear under attention. This is how respect compounds, quietly, consistently. Reminded himself daily that external validation was unstable and irrelevant. When you release the need to be liked, your gaze stops searching for approval. It becomes grounded, neutral, clear. And paradoxically, that neutrality attracts respect far more than any attempt to command it. Take action now. Train your breath. Observe your impulses. Practice stillness. Let your eyes reflect the calm you are building within. Because calm, unbroken eye contact is not a trick, it's a byproduct of inner order. And when your inner world is ordered, the outer world responds without resistance. Number 3, slow, deliberate movements. Slow, deliberate movement is not about theatrics. It's about inner order made visible. When you move without rushing, without twitching, without apologizing to the air around you, you communicate something before a single word leaves your mouth. You are not controlled by urgency. And that alone changes how people respond to you. Most people move as if they're being chased by their own thoughts. Their bodies leak anxiety. Their gestures betray impatience. Stoicism teaches the opposite. It teaches composure as a form of power. Wrote, "Do nothing hastily or without purpose." That wasn't advice for philosophy alone. It was guidance for how you inhabit your body in the world. When your movements are slow and intentional, your nervous system settles. And when your nervous system settles, your presence deepens. You stop broadcasting need. You stop signaling reactivity. You become grounded. This is why deliberate movement commands respect. It suggests self-mastery. People instinctively trust what appears controlled. They defer to what appears unshaken. You don't have to demand attention. Your stillness already holds it. What you must understand is that speed is often compensation. Fast gestures, abrupt shifts, restless hands, they come from an unconscious desire to fill space, to justify existence, to keep up. Stoicism asks you to abandon that impulse. Epictetus said, "No man is free who cannot command himself." Your body is the first territory to govern. When you slow down your movements, you're not just changing how others see you, you're reclaiming authority over your inner state. Begin by noticing how often you rush without necessity, how your body moves ahead of your mind, how your gestures arrive before your thoughts are finished. This disconnect weakens your presence. Deliberate movement reconnects intention with action. It restores alignment, and alignment is felt. Even if no one can explain it, they sense it. Slow movement also reframes time. When you move deliberately, you're signaling that you are not at the mercy of the moment. You are choosing your pace. That choice communicates confidence more loudly than posture or eye contact ever could. Seneca warned against living as if you are always late to your own life. Slowness is not laziness, it is precision. It says, "I am here, fully, and I will act when I decide." There's a practical discipline you can adopt immediately. Throughout the day, choose one action to perform at half your usual speed, not mechanically, mindfully. Feel each transition, each shift, each pause. Let the movement finish before starting the next. This trains patience at the physical level where habits are hardest to fake. Over time, your baseline pace changes. You become calmer without trying, more deliberate without effort. Another exercise is to remove unnecessary motion. Watch how often your body fills silence with movement, adjusting, fidgeting, correcting. These are tells. Stoicism teaches economy of words, of emotion, of motion. Practice stillness. Let your body rest between actions. This pause is not emptiness, it's authority. Reminded himself to remain like a rock against which the waves continually break. Rocks don't rush, they endure. Slow movement also affects how your words land. When your gestures are measured, your speech gains weight. You don't interrupt yourself physically. You don't chase reactions. You allow space. And space creates gravity. People listen more closely when they feel you are not trying to persuade them. Respect grows in that absence of force. You may notice resistance at first. Slowing down can feel uncomfortable because it removes distraction. It exposes inner restlessness. That's the point. Stoicism isn't about numbing discomfort, it's about observing it without obeying it. Let the urge to rush pass without acting on it. Each time you do, you strengthen self-command. There's also an internal shift that happens when you move deliberately. Your thoughts become clearer. Your emotions stabilize. The body teaches the mind. This is why Stoic practice was never purely intellectual. It was embodied philosophy. How you sit, how you walk, how you gesture. These are daily rehearsals of character. Take action now. Choose slowness as a discipline, not a performance. Strip urgency from your movements. Let intention lead motion. Govern your body and your presence will follow, because respect is rarely demanded, it's sensed. And nothing signals inner strength more clearly than a man who moves as if he owns his time, his space, and himself. Number 4, relaxed but upright posture. Relaxed but upright posture is not about standing tall like you're trying to prove something. It's about inhabiting your body as if you already belong wherever you are. The difference is subtle, but people feel it instantly. When your posture is upright without tension, your body communicates something your mouth never needs to say. You're comfortable with yourself, you're grounded, and you don't need to borrow authority from noise or force. Stoicism understood this long before modern psychology gave it language. Wrote, "Stand up straight," or "Be held straight." not as a command to puff your chest, but as a reminder that dignity begins internally and expresses itself physically. When your posture collapses, your mind follows. Shoulders roll forward, chest caves in, breath shortens, and suddenly your presence feels apologetic even if your words are confident. On the other extreme, forced rigidity creates resistance. Tension signals fear disguised as strength. Respect doesn't come from either. It comes from balance. Relaxed but upright posture signals that your nervous system is calm, that you're not scanning for approval or threat, that you're stable within yourself. And stability is magnetic. You don't chase respect when you embody it. You need to understand that posture is not cosmetic. It's neurological. Your body and mind are in constant conversation, and posture is one of the loudest messages you send inward. When you align your spine, soften your shoulders, and let your chest open naturally, your breath deepens without effort. Your voice steadies. Your movements slow just enough to feel intentional. Epictetus taught that freedom begins with self-governance, and posture is one of the simplest forms of governance available to you. You're telling your system, I'm safe, I'm present, I'm in control. Most people confuse relaxation with collapse. True relaxation is alert, it's awake, it's ease without laziness. Imagine your head gently lifting upward, not strained, just supported. Your shoulders drop because they don't need to defend. Your chest opens not to impress but to breathe fully. Your weight distributes evenly, grounding you. This posture doesn't beg for attention and it doesn't avoid it either. It simply is. And that's why it commands respect. It communicates self-trust. Stoicism emphasizes harmony with nature, and your body has a natural alignment it constantly tries to return to. When you fight it, through tension, hunching, or rigidity, you create friction. When you allow alignment, energy flows. Seneca wrote, "The mind that is anxious about future events is miserable." Anxiety shows up physically before it becomes conscious. By correcting your posture, you interrupt that loop. You become calmer first, then confident, not the other way around. To train this, begin with awareness. Several times a day, pause and scan your body, not critically, curiously. Notice where you're holding tension: jaw, neck, shoulders, lower back. Then release just enough to feel space. Don't is still insecurity. Let alignment be gentle. This is a practice, not a performance. Next, work with breath. Inhale slowly through your nose, letting the breath expand you rather than lifting your shoulders. Exhale longer than you inhale. This activates calm. As your breath settles, your posture adjusts naturally. You're not forcing your body into confidence. You're allowing it. This is Stoic discipline in action, governing the inner state so the outer follows. Another powerful exercise is stillness. Stand or sit upright and remain still for 1 minute. No fidgeting. No adjustment unless necessary. This trains comfort in your own presence. Most people move constantly because stillness exposes insecurity. When you can remain relaxed and upright without distraction, you signal immense composure. Practice stillness of mind. You can practice stillness of body as an extension of the same principle. Pay attention to transitions, how you sit down, how you stand up, how you pause. These moments reveal more than grand gestures ever will. Move deliberately without rush. Not slow for effect, but unhurried because you're not reactive. Stoicism teaches response over reaction. Your posture should reflect that philosophy. Over time, this posture becomes identity. You're no longer doing it, you're living in it. And people respond differently. Not because you demanded respect, but because your presence feels solid, safe, unshakable. You don't lean into others for validation, and you don't pull away defensively. You stand where you are fully. Take action now. Audit your posture today. Reset it gently, often. Pair it with breath. Practice stillness. Let alignment become your baseline. Because when your body is relaxed but upright, your mind follows suit. And when your mind is steady, respect is no longer something you chase. It's something you naturally receive. Number 5. Minimal, purposeful gestures. Minimal, purposeful gestures carry a quiet authority that noise can never replicate. You feel it immediately when someone moves with restraint, when nothing about them is rushed, exaggerated, or desperate for acknowledgement. Their body isn't asking for permission. It isn't pleading to be noticed. It simply is. And that presence commands respect before a single word is spoken. Stoicism has always emphasized this economy of motion. Reminded himself, let your bearing be neither careless nor tense but natural. That balance, controlled yet relaxed, is exactly where respect lies. Most people leak energy through unnecessary movement, fidgeting, over-gesturing, constant adjustments. The body reveals the state of the mind, and a restless body signals inner disorder. When your gestures are excessive, you communicate uncertainty without realizing it. Purposeful minimalism reverses this instantly. When you move only when movement is required, every gesture gains weight. Stillness becomes your default, action your deliberate choice. This tells the world that you are not reacting, you are deciding. Stoicism teaches mastery over impulses, and the body is where those impulses first surface. Every twitch is an urge. Every exaggerated movement is an unfiltered thought escaping through muscle and posture. Epictetus warned, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That mastery begins with restraint. When you discipline your gestures, you discipline your nervous system. You slow yourself down. You create space between stimulus and response. And in that space, respect is born. You don't need to add anything to your body language. You need to remove excess. Strip away what is unnecessary. Let your hands rest unless they are reinforcing meaning. Let your head remain steady unless movement serves clarity. Let your posture do the speaking. Purposeful gestures are not small because they are weak. They are small because they are precise. Precision signals confidence. It tells others you trust your presence enough not to decorate it. There is a paradox here that the Stoics understood well. The less you try to project power, the more power you convey. Minimal movement signals that you are comfortable occupying space. You are not scrambling to justify yourself. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." Bravery in this sense is the courage to remain still, to resist the urge to fill silence or emptiness with motion, to let pauses exist without apologizing for them. To embody this, begin with awareness. Spend a day noticing how often you move without purpose, not to judge, just to observe. Awareness alone will reduce excess. Then introduce this practice. Before any gesture, pause internally and ask, does this movement add clarity or authority? If the answer is no, let it dissolve. This pause trains intentionality. Over time, your body learns restraint as a default state. Another exercise is stillness under pressure. When you feel the urge to react physically, shift, nod excessively, gesture prematurely, practice grounding yourself through your breath. Slow it, deepen it. Let the urge pass without action. This is Stoic training in real time. You are teaching your body that not every impulse requires expression. The result is a calm, centered presence that others instinctively respect. Minimal gestures also sharpen contrast. When you do move, when your hand lifts, when your head turns, when your body leans, it means something. The movement lands, it carries intention. This is why leaders and thinkers throughout history moved sparingly. They understood that economy creates emphasis, spoke of doing what is essential and nothing more. Apply this to your physical expression, and your body language aligns with reason rather than reflex. There is also humility in purposeful restraint. You are not trying to dominate space. You are inhabiting it with composure. Stoicism rejects performative dominance in favor of inner strength. When your movements are calm and measured, you signal that your confidence is internal, not performative. And internal confidence is unmistakable. As you practice this, you may feel exposed at first. Stillness can feel uncomfortable when you're used to hiding behind motion. That discomfort is a sign of growth. Stay with it. Let your body settle. Over time, stillness becomes home. And from that home, every movement becomes intentional rather than compensatory. Take action now. Reduce. Refine. Discipline your gestures until they mirror the clarity of your mind. Speak with your posture. Decide with your movements. Let stillness do the heavy lifting. Because when your body stops begging for attention, respect arrives on its own, quietly, immediately, and without effort. Number 6. Controlled facial expression. Controlled facial expression is not about being cold, stiff, or unreadable. It's about mastery, about deciding consciously what the world gets access to and what it doesn't. Your face is the fastest way you give yourself away. Before you speak, before you move, before you think you've revealed anything at all, your face has already told a story. Most people let that story run on autopilot. You don't. And that single difference quietly shifts how others treat you. When your facial expressions are unmanaged, your inner world spills outward without consent. Every irritation, every insecurity, every need for approval flashes across your face in micro moments. You might think you're hiding it. You're not. Humans are extraordinarily good at sensing emotional leakage. And when they sense it, respect thins. Not because they're cruel, but because instability never inspires confidence. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus reminded us that no man is free who is not master of himself. Your face is part of that mastery. Controlled expression doesn't mean suppressing emotion until it rots inside you. It means choosing composure over compulsion, choosing response over reaction. Wrote, "Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm." Your face is that cliff, calm, still, not unmoved but unshaken. When your expression remains steady, you communicate that your emotions belong to you, not to circumstances, not to other people. The power here is subtle. A controlled face doesn't beg for validation. It doesn't rush to reassure. It doesn't scramble to be liked. And paradoxically, that restraint draws respect. When people can't immediately read approval, anxiety, or defensiveness on your face, they slow down around you. They become more measured, more careful. They listen more closely. Silence, when paired with composure, carries weight. You train this skill by first noticing how often your face reacts without permission, tightening, smiling too quickly, frowning before you've even decided how you feel. These are habits, not truths, and habits can be retrained. Start by practicing neutrality, not blankness, neutrality. Let your face rest. Let it return to baseline after emotion passes instead of clinging to expression. This alone changes how grounded you appear. There is a Stoic exercise that applies perfectly here. Pause before assent. The Stoics believed emotions arise from judgments and judgments can be delayed. Apply this to your face. When something triggers you, do nothing for a beat. One breath. Let your expression remain composed while your mind catches up. This pause interrupts emotional reflex. Over time, it becomes natural. You stop broadcasting internal noise. Another discipline is learning to soften intensity without dissolving authority. Many people mistake control for hardness. That's unnecessary. A relaxed jaw, steady eyes, and minimal movement signal confidence far more than tension ever could. Tension communicates fear. Ease communicates ownership. Seneca warned against becoming a slave to agitation, saying, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." Your face often suffers in advance. Release it. Practice this daily. Stand or sit quietly and allow your facial muscles to relax completely. Notice where you hold unnecessary strain. Forehead, jaw, eyes, let it go. This is not cosmetic, it's psychological. A relaxed face feeds back into a calm nervous system, and a calm nervous system supports clearer judgment. Stoicism is not abstract philosophy, it is physiology guided by reason. Controlled facial expression also protects you from manipulation. When others can't easily read approval or disapproval, they lose leverage. You become harder to provoke, flatter, or unsettle. That doesn't make you distant, it makes you sovereign. Wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." Your face reveals that estimate instantly. Control the estimate and the face follows. There's also dignity in restraint. Not everything deserves a visible reaction. When you respond selectively, your reactions gain meaning. People begin to notice when you do smile, when you do show intensity, because it's no longer constant. Scarcity applies to expression as much as to words, and scarcity creates value. This doesn't mean you become robotic. It means you become intentional. Your expressions align with your values rather than your impulses. That alignment is what others feel as presence. You're not scattered. You're here, fully, calmly, and that calm is contagious. End each day with reflection, another Stoic practice. Ask yourself, where did I give my face away today? Where did I stay composed? No judgment, just awareness. Improvement follows observation. Over time, you'll notice something powerful. People begin to mirror you. Conversations slow. Respect increases, not because you demanded it, but because your self-command made it inevitable. Take action now. Train your face the same way you train your mind. Govern expression. Practice restraint. Choose composure. Because when your face no longer betrays you, your presence becomes unshakable. An unshakable presence is something people instinctively respect. Number 7, comfortable silence. Comfortable silence is one of the rarest signals of inner authority, and that's precisely why it commands respect. Most people rush to fill space with words, gestures, nervous movements, explanations they weren't asked for. You feel the impulse too, the subtle tension that whispers, say something, do something, react. But the moment you resist that urge, something shifts. Silence stops being empty. It becomes deliberate, grounded, heavy in the best way, and others feel it before they understand it. Stoicism has always treated silence as strength, not absence. Reminded himself, be silent as to services you have rendered, but speak of services rendered to you. Beneath that line is a deeper truth. You don't need to announce your presence for it to be felt. When you are comfortable in silence, your body communicates calm self-trust. Your posture settles, your breath slows, your eyes stop darting for approval. You are no longer performing, you are being. And respect grows naturally around people who are not trying to manufacture it. Uncomfortable silence exposes insecurity. Comfortable silence reveals self-possession. The difference is internal, not situational. When you're uneasy with silence, your body leaks tension. Micro-movements, forced smiles, restless hands. But when you accept silence, your body language becomes economical. Stillness replaces noise. Economy replaces excess. Epictetus taught that freedom begins when you stop being disturbed by things outside your control. Silence is the first training ground for that freedom. You learn that nothing collapses when you don't rush to respond. You learn that your worth doesn't depend on constant output. You must understand this clearly. Silence is not passive, it's active restraint. It's the discipline of not reaching for stimulation, validation, or dominance. When you speak less, every movement gains weight, every word lands harder, and people instinctively recalibrate around you. They slow down. They listen, not because you demanded attention, but because your composure set the tone. This is where Stoicism becomes physical. Your body learns what your mind already knows, that urgency is optional. Begin practicing stillness deliberately. Sit or stand without adjusting yourself unnecessarily. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Breathe through your nose and lengthen the exhale. This isn't relaxation theater. It's nervous system control. You're teaching your body that silence is safe, that nothing needs to be fixed in this moment. Seneca warned, We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. The fear of silence lives almost entirely in imagination. You imagine judgment, awkwardness, rejection. But when you stop reacting to those thoughts, they dissolve. And what remains is presence. Presence is felt instantly. It's why comfortable silence commands respect without effort. Another essential practice is to delay response, not to appear calculated but to remain centered. When something is said, allow a brief pause before you move or speak. Feel your feet on the ground. Feel your spine upright. This pause interrupts reactivity. It communicates that you are not governed by impulse, and people instinctively trust those who are not impulsive. Silence also sharpens your gaze. When you're not busy filling space, your eyes become steady, observant, calm. The Stoics believed attention was power. When your attention is undistracted, your body aligns with it. You stop fidgeting. You stop shrinking. You occupy space without apology. That alone reshapes how others perceive you. There's also a moral dimension to silence. Wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." Comfortable silence is embodiment, not explanation. You don't need to justify your presence. You let your demeanor speak, and demeanor, sustained over time, becomes reputation. Practice this daily. Spend a few minutes in complete stillness without external input. No phone, no music, no movement unless necessary. Observe the discomfort without correcting it. Let it rise. Let it fall. This is how you train equanimity. Over time, your body learns to remain settled even when the mind searches for escape. That training transfers directly into social presence. Understand this final point deeply. Respect is not negotiated through words. It's transmitted through regulation. When you are comfortable with silence, you signal that you are comfortable with yourself. And nothing commands respect faster than a person who does not need to prove they belong. Take this seriously. Train stillness. Choose silence deliberately. Let your body learn calm authority. Because when you master comfortable silence, you don't just gain respect, you become unshakable. Number 8, entering and exiting without hurry. Entering and exiting without hurry is not about movement, it's about inner command. The body only reveals what the mind has already decided. When you rush, you announce dependence. When you linger anxiously, you signal uncertainty. But when you move with calm timing, neither fast nor slow, neither apologetic nor performative, you communicate something rare, self-possession. You are not chasing approval. You are not fleeing judgment. You are simply arriving and later choosing to leave. That choice is felt before it is understood. Respect begins there. Stoicism teaches that urgency is often a symptom of misplaced value. Wrote, "You don't need to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you." Haste is the body turning moments into emergencies. When you enter a space without hurry, your nervous system remains settled. Your breathing stays low. Your posture remains uncompressed. And everyone around you senses it, even if they can't explain why. Calm timing tells the world you are internally ordered, and order is magnetic. You may not realize how often movement betrays inner insecurity. Quick steps, abrupt stops, rushed gestures. These are the physical echoes of a mind that feels evaluated. Stoicism asks you to withdraw from that mental courtroom. Epictetus reminded his students that external opinions are not within their control. When you internalize that truth, your body stops trying to compensate. You no longer need to prove presence through speed or dominance through noise. You simply are. And that stillness, expressed through unhurried motion, commands attention without demanding it. Entering without hurry means you let the environment come to you. You don't scan frantically. You don't adjust yourself mid-step. You allow a brief pause not as a tactic but as a natural consequence of composure. That pause is powerful. It signals awareness. It tells others that you are grounded enough to observe before engaging. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." Bravery here is not aggression. It's the courage to move at your own pace, regardless of the room's tempo. Exiting without hurry carries equal weight. Many people rush their exits unconsciously, as if escaping evaluation. But when you leave calmly, you reclaim narrative authority. You are not leaving because you are dismissed. You are leaving because you choose to. This distinction matters. The Stoics believed that freedom is exercised most clearly in moments of departure. How you leave reveals whether you feel owned by the situation or sovereign over yourself. This practice requires internal discipline. Begin with breath. Before entering or exiting any space, take one slow breath. Not exaggerated, just deliberate. This anchors your nervous system and slows your movement naturally. Breath precedes posture. Posture precedes perception. You are training your body to follow your mind, not your anxiety. Another exercise is timing awareness. Notice how often you feel the impulse to rush. Don't judge it, just observe it. Observation creates distance. Distance creates choice. Emphasize this repeatedly. Between stimulus and response lies your power. When you choose not to rush, you are exercising that power physically. The body becomes a tool of philosophy. You can also practice deliberate transitions. Transitions reveal character. Entering, exiting, sitting, standing. Perform each with the same unforced tempo. This consistency builds coherence. People trust what feels consistent. Respect what feels stable. Your movement becomes predictable in the best way, calm, measured, reliable. It's important to understand that unhurried movement is not slowness. It's efficiency without tension. You are not delaying. You are not performing calmness. You are simply refusing to let external pressure dictate your rhythm. Epictetus taught that peace comes from aligning action with reason. Reason says there is no prize for speed when speed is unnecessary. As you practice this, something subtle changes inside you. You begin to feel less reactive, less compelled to explain yourself, less dependent on immediate validation. This internal shift is what others respond to. Respect is not demanded, it's inferred. And inference happens silently. Make this a daily discipline. Choose one moment each day to consciously enter or exit without hurry. Just one. Let it be imperfect. Let it be quiet. Over time, your body will relearn calm as its default. And when calm becomes your default, respect follows naturally. Remember this, the world is always rushing. When you don't, you stand out not loudly but unmistakably. And as reminded himself, the tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do. That tranquility lives in your timing. Use it. Before you leave, remember this. Respect is not demanded, it is demonstrated. The Stoics understood something most people still miss today. You don't earn authority by being loud, aggressive, or constantly proving yourself. You earn it by how you carry yourself when no one is impressed yet. Every posture you hold, every pause you allow, every calm reaction you choose is a silent declaration of self-mastery. You don't need to dominate the room. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need approval. When your body language reflects inner discipline, people feel it instantly, often before you ever speak. This is the kind of respect that can't be taken away because it isn't based on status, looks, or words. It's built on composure, presence, and control, the very traits Stoicism has taught for centuries. Now here's the real challenge. Don't just understand these moves, embody them. Choose one today, practice it consciously. Let your silence speak. Let your stillness lead. Over time, you'll notice something powerful. People begin to adjust to you. If this video helped you see yourself differently, make sure you like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to carry themselves with more calm authority. And remember, true power is quiet, controlled, and unmistakable. It is not that things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that things are difficult. Seneca. What if I told you that most modern marriages don't fail because of a lack of love, attraction, or effort, but because the rules of marriage itself have quietly changed, and almost no man was warned in advance? What if the version of marriage you were sold, partnership, loyalty, shared sacrifice, no longer exists in the form your father or grandfather knew? And what if walking into it blindly today carries risks that society never talks about, but expects you to absorb in silence? Everywhere you look, divorce rates are climbing, commitment is weakening, and men are being told to just do better, while the institution itself is eroding from the inside. This isn't about hating women. It's about understanding incentives, power shifts, and cultural conditioning, and how ignoring them can cost you your peace, your purpose, and your future. In this video, we're going to strip emotion from the discussion and examine marriage through a calm, stoic lens. Facts over feelings, clarity over comfort. Watch till the very end, because the final insight may change how you view relationships, commitment, and your role as a man forever. Number 1, marriage shifted from duty and commitment to personal happiness and emotional fulfillment. There's a deeper shift beneath the noise, and if you don't look at it clearly, you'll miss what's actually happening. Marriage didn't collapse overnight. It drifted, slowly, quietly, almost politely. What once stood on duty, endurance, and shared responsibility has been redefined around personal happiness and emotional fulfillment. And when happiness becomes the primary metric, commitment quietly becomes conditional. Stoicism saw this danger long ago. Warned, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. When marriage is estimated as a tool for constant emotional satisfaction, it is set up to fail the moment life becomes uncomfortable, which it always does. You live in a culture that teaches you to ask, "Am I happy?" far more often than, "Am I honorable?" or "Am I steady?" That question seems harmless, even healthy, until it becomes the only standard by which lifelong commitments are judged. Stoicism never dismissed emotion, but it never allowed emotion to lead. Seneca wrote, "He who lives in harmony with himself lives in harmony with the universe." Harmony comes from character, not from chasing feelings. When marriage is expected to constantly validate, excite, and emotionally fulfill, it stops being a discipline and turns into a demand. This shift didn't just change expectations, it changed tolerance. When happiness is framed as a right rather than a byproduct of virtue, endurance starts to feel like oppression, patience feels like settling, duty feels outdated, and the idea of staying through emotional droughts feels unreasonable. But Stoicism teaches you something modern culture avoids. Discomfort is not a sign of failure, it's a condition of growth. Epictetus was blunt. First say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. Marriage, when rooted in duty, asks you to become something stronger than your moods. When rooted in emotional fulfillment, it asks the opposite. It asks the relationship to serve you endlessly. You can feel the tension here. Emotional fulfillment is unpredictable. It rises and falls. It responds to stress, novelty, fatigue, and time. Duty, on the other hand, is stable. It doesn't ask how you feel today. It asks who you decided to be. When marriage shifts away from duty, it becomes vulnerable to every emotional fluctuation. Stoicism doesn't deny emotion, it trains you not to obey it blindly. Reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. A marriage anchored in duty assumes both partners will govern themselves first. A marriage anchored in happiness quietly assumes the opposite. This is where the problem compounds. When emotional fulfillment becomes the goal, disappointment feels personal rather than situational. Every unmet expectation starts to feel like betrayal. And instead of asking, "What am I responsible for maintaining?" the question becomes, why am I not being fulfilled? Stoicism reverses this lens. Seneca advised, demand much of yourself and expect little from others. That mindset builds resilience. The modern framing builds fragility. One prepares you to carry weight. The other prepares you to abandon it when it becomes heavy. You're not meant to hear this as an attack. You're meant to hear it as a warning. Marriage cannot survive if both people enter it primarily to be fulfilled rather than to contribute. Emotional fulfillment is a result, not a foundation. When it becomes the foundation, every season of silence, stress, or stagnation feels like proof something is broken. Stoicism teaches you that seasons are not verdicts, they are tests. Wrote, the universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it. Change is inevitable. Stability must be chosen. If you want to protect yourself from this trap, you have to retrain how you think about commitment. Start with this exercise. Write down what you believe marriage owes you. Then write down what you believe you owe marriage. Compare the lists honestly. Stoicism demands this kind of self-examination. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." If your expectations outweigh your obligations, dissatisfaction is guaranteed. Not because marriage failed, but because the frame was wrong from the start. Another practice is emotional discipline. This doesn't mean suppressing feelings. It means not letting them dictate permanent decisions. Each day, ask yourself, did I act today based on principle or based on mood? That single question reveals more than any argument ever could. Seneca believed daily reflection was essential to character, not to judge yourself harshly, but to correct course before drift becomes damage. The truth is simple, even if it's uncomfortable. A marriage built on duty can survive periods without happiness. A marriage built on happiness rarely survives periods without excitement. Stoicism sides with endurance, not because it is cold, but because it is honest about human nature. Feelings change, commitments hold. And when commitments hold long enough, fulfillment often returns, deeper, quieter, and more real than before. If you want something that lasts, you must choose something harder than chasing how you feel. You must choose who you are when feelings fade. That is the Stoic path. Not resentment, not blame, responsibility, discipline, and the courage to build something that doesn't collapse the moment it stops entertaining you. Number 2, unrealistic expectations, fueled by social media and romanticized narratives. There's a tension you can feel but rarely see named clearly. Marriage is collapsing under the weight of expectations that were never meant to be carried by real people. And a large part of that weight comes from images, narratives, and fantasies that reward emotion over reality. Stoicism cuts through this illusion with uncomfortable honesty. Warned, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. When expectations are shaped by screens instead of substance, by performance instead of principle, disappointment becomes inevitable. Not because marriage is broken, but because the standard being chased was never human to begin with. You live in a time where romance is constantly edited, filtered, dramatized, and monetized. Love is no longer presented as something built through patience, sacrifice, and discipline. It's sold as a feeling that should never fade, a spark that should never dim, a partner who should always intuit, provide, excite, and validate. When those expectations settle into the mind, they don't arrive quietly. They arrive with entitlement, with comparison, with the silent belief that if something feels difficult, it must be wrong. Stoicism stands in direct opposition to this softness. Epictetus said it plainly. Do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather, wish that what happens happen the way it happens. Unrealistic expectations don't just distort relationships, they erode respect. When marriage is viewed through romanticized narratives, effort becomes invisible. Commitment becomes conditional. The ordinary rhythms of life feel like failure instead of stability. You start measuring your relationship against fantasies instead of values. And once that happens, dissatisfaction grows even when nothing is truly wrong. Stoicism teaches that peace comes not from getting what you want, but from wanting what aligns with reason. Marriage was never meant to be a constant emotional high. It was meant to be a shared discipline, a partnership of endurance, a structure strong enough to hold two flawed people as they grow. What social media does so effectively is train the mind to expect novelty without responsibility. It rewards the dramatic moment, not the quiet consistency. It glorifies attention, not loyalty. Over time, this rewires desire. You begin to crave stimulation over depth, affirmation over effort. Seneca warned, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." When attention is scattered across endless romantic ideals, no single bond is ever allowed to deepen properly. Marriage suffers not because it lacks love, but because it's being compared to illusions that never had to survive real life. You may notice how quickly dissatisfaction is framed as empowerment, how walking away is celebrated more than working through, how patience is portrayed as settling. Stoicism challenges this narrative aggressively. Reminded himself, the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. When thoughts are fed by curated fantasies, happiness becomes fragile. Marriage then becomes a performance review instead of a moral commitment. And once commitment is treated like a mood, it collapses the moment feelings fluctuate. This isn't about suppressing desire or denying emotion. Stoicism never asked for numbness. It asked for order, for reason to lead emotion instead of chasing it. Unrealistic expectations flourish when emotion is treated as authority, when I feel becomes more important than I chose. Marriage, at its core, is a choice repeated daily, especially when it's inconvenient. Social media narratives rarely show that repetition. They sell endings, not endurance, and endurance is where character is formed. If you want to counter this influence, you must train your mind deliberately. Start with expectation audits. Write down what you believe marriage should feel like at all times. Then ask yourself one brutal question: is this expectation rooted in virtue or fantasy? Stoicism demands that you separate what is within your control from what is not. You cannot control constant excitement. You cannot control perpetual emotional intensity. But you can control your commitment, your conduct, your effort. Epictetus said, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." Another practice is narrative fasting. Reduce how much romanticized content you consume, even temporarily. Not out of bitterness, but clarity. Give your mind space to recalibrate. Notice how your emotional baseline shifts when you're no longer comparing your private life to public performances. This isn't withdrawal, it's detox. Seneca advised simplicity for this very reason. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor. Excessive romantic expectation creates emotional poverty, not fulfillment. You also need to reframe effort. Effort is not evidence that something is wrong. Effort is evidence that something matters. Stoicism honors effort because it builds virtue. When marriage becomes difficult, that difficulty is not an alarm bell, it's a training ground. Viewed obstacles as teachers, not threats. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. The same applies here. The friction you resist is often the friction that matures you. If you want a grounded exercise, do this weekly. Write one page on what marriage requires of you, not what it owes you. Focus only on your discipline, your patience, your restraint, your honesty. This shifts your orientation from consumption to contribution. Over time, unrealistic expectations lose their grip because your identity is no longer built around being satisfied, but being solid. Marriage was never designed to compete with fantasy. It was designed to build legacy, stability, and character. When expectations are fueled by romanticized narratives, marriage is asked to entertain instead of endure. That's an impossible standard. Stoicism restores sanity by reminding you that meaning comes from alignment with reason, not emotional spectacle. Seneca put it best: "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." Expectation-driven disappointment is exactly that: unnecessary suffering. So if you want marriage to survive, your habits must change. Your consumption must change. Your definitions must change. Replace fantasy with discipline. Replace comparison with commitment. Replace emotional addiction with moral clarity. When you do, marriage stops feeling like a burden and starts feeling like what it was always meant to be: a shared path that strengthens you precisely because it isn't perfect. Number 3, prioritizing independence over cooperation and long-term compromise. There's a tension at the heart of modern marriage that few want to name out loud. Independence has been elevated into a virtue so absolute that cooperation now feels like a threat. Compromise is framed as weakness. Long-term thinking is quietly replaced with short-term self-protection. And when this mindset enters marriage, the structure doesn't crack all at once. It erodes from the inside. Stoicism offers a lens that cuts through the noise. Wrote, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee." Marriage, by its nature, is a hive. When independence becomes more important than shared direction, the system cannot hold. You've been taught to admire autonomy, self-sufficiency, and personal freedom above all else. On their own, these qualities aren't destructive. Stoicism never argued against strength or self-command. In fact, Epictetus insisted that mastery of the self is the foundation of a good life. But the problem begins when independence stops being a tool and becomes an identity. When cooperation is seen as limitation instead of leverage. Marriage doesn't ask you to disappear. It asks you to align. And alignment requires surrender, not of dignity but of ego. The Stoics understood that human beings are not designed to live as isolated units. Reminded himself daily, human beings are made for each other. Marriage is not a contract of convenience. It is a long game of shared responsibility. When independence is prioritized above cooperation, every disagreement becomes a boundary dispute. Every inconvenience feels like a violation. Every sacrifice feels like loss. Over time, this mindset trains you to protect yourself from your partner instead of building with them. What quietly undermines marriage is not conflict, it's refusal. Refusal to bend, refusal to negotiate, refusal to carry weight that doesn't immediately benefit you. Stoicism teaches endurance, not entitlement. Seneca warned, "He who lives only for himself lives a very small life." Marriage demands a larger frame. It requires you to think in decades, not moods, in seasons, not moments. When independence becomes the highest value, long-term compromise feels intolerable because it asks you to delay gratification, restrain impulses, and place something above immediate self-interest. You may notice how easily modern language turns cooperation into oppression. Words like settling, losing yourself, or being controlled replace older ideas of duty, loyalty, and shared sacrifice. Stoicism cuts through that distortion by asking a simple question: does this choice strengthen your character or weaken it? Compromise, when chosen deliberately, strengthens discipline. Cooperation builds patience. Long-term thinking sharpens wisdom. These are not losses. They are virtues earned through friction. Epictetus taught, "Don't seek for things to happen as you wish, but wish for things to happen as they do, and you will go on well." Marriage operates on this principle. You do not get to engineer a partner who never disrupts your preferences. You are invited to grow through difference. When independence dominates, growth is replaced by exit strategies. The mind stays half-packed. Commitment becomes conditional. And once that mindset takes root, the bond weakens, not because of betrayal, but because of emotional distance disguised as self-respect. Long-term compromise isn't about losing power, it's about distributing it wisely. Two people moving in slightly adjusted directions can cover more ground than one person sprinting alone. Stoicism emphasizes reason over impulse. Ask yourself honestly, is your resistance to cooperation rooted in clarity or in fear of vulnerability? Independence can be a shield. It can also be a wall. The Stoics didn't confuse emotional avoidance with strength. They trained themselves to face discomfort without fleeing it. Here, where responsibility enters. Marriage doesn't fail because one person wants autonomy. It falters when autonomy refuses to coexist with accountability. Wrote, if you can benefit the community, you benefit yourself. In marriage, the community is the union itself. Decisions made purely for personal comfort slowly starve the relationship, not dramatically, quietly, until resentment replaces trust and parallel lives replace partnership. Stoicism invites you to practice voluntary restraint, to choose discipline over indulgence, to act according to principle rather than impulse. These skills are essential in marriage. Long-term compromise requires you to say no to yourself regularly, not because you are lesser, but because the bond is greater. When independence is prioritized above this, marriage becomes a negotiation between two individuals instead of a shared mission. To recalibrate, you must train your thinking. Begin with this exercise. Each morning, remind yourself that cooperation is not submission. Write one sentence. Today, I will act in a way that strengthens the union, not just myself. Let that guide small decisions. Another practice is delayed judgment. When resistance rises, pause, breathe. Ask, is this about principle or preference? Stoicism teaches you to distinguish what truly matters from what merely irritates. You can also practice long-range vision. Once a week, reflect on the kind of life you are building, not next month, but in 20 years. Seneca advised, let us think of life as a whole. Independence that ignores the future is not freedom, it's short-sightedness. Cooperation, when guided by reason, is an investment. Compromise, when chosen consciously, compounds over time. Marriage doesn't collapse because people want strength. It collapses when strength refuses to share space. Stoicism does not glorify selfishness dressed up as empowerment. It honors balance, duty, mutual reliance. The courage to stay engaged when walking away would be easier. When independence overshadows cooperation, marriage stops being a discipline and becomes a convenience. And conveniences are discarded when they demand effort. You are not asked to abandon yourself. You are asked to master yourself, to choose character over comfort, to understand that freedom without responsibility is fragile and intimacy without compromise is impossible. Said, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. In marriage, the best protection is to be unlike the culture that teaches you to put yourself first at all costs. So slow down. Relearn cooperation as a strength. Train compromise as a skill, not a surrender. Think long. Act deliberately. Marriage survives not on passion alone, but on disciplined partnership. And discipline, as the Stoics knew well, is not a cage. It's the structure that makes freedom sustainable. Number 4, loss of respect for traditional marital roles and responsibilities. There's a tension you can feel beneath the surface of modern marriage, and it isn't loud at first. It shows up quietly, through confusion about roles, reluctance toward responsibility, and a subtle erosion of respect for structure itself. Stoicism teaches you to look past emotion and examine causes. Wrote, the universe is change. Our life is what our thoughts make it. When the shared understanding of marital roles dissolves, marriage doesn't collapse overnight. It slowly loses its spine. What you're witnessing isn't rebellion against tradition for growth's sake, but confusion dressed up as progress, and confusion always carries a cost. Traditional marital roles were never about dominance or submission. They were about order, about clarity, about two people knowing where they stand and what is expected of them so energy could be directed toward building, not negotiating endlessly. When respect for those roles disappears, marriage turns into a negotiation without end. You feel it when accountability is avoided but authority is demanded, when benefits are desired but burdens are resented. Stoicism reminds you that harmony comes from alignment with nature, not from pretending structure is oppression. Epictetus said, "First learn the meaning of what you say and then speak." The same applies to commitment. If roles are rejected without understanding their purpose, marriage becomes a vague idea rather than a disciplined practice. You're encouraged today to believe that roles limit freedom, but freedom without responsibility is not freedom, it's drift. Traditional roles anchored marriage by assigning duties that balanced each other. When that respect erodes, resentment grows quietly. Expectations become selective. Responsibility becomes optional, and respect fades not because of cruelty, but because inconsistency erodes trust. Stoicism teaches that respect is earned through conduct, not demanded through ideology. Seneca warned, "He who is brave is free." Courage in marriage looks like embracing responsibility even when culture encourages avoidance. What often goes unspoken is that rejecting roles doesn't eliminate them, it just makes them invisible and contested. Someone still carries the weight, someone still sacrifices, someone still leads when decisions must be made. When respect for structure is lost, power struggles replace cooperation, not because people are evil but because nature abhors a vacuum. Stoicism insists that order is not tyranny, it is stability. Reminded himself, what brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee. Marriage is a hive. Roles exist to protect the whole, not to elevate one ego over another. You may notice how easily respect dissolves when responsibility is mocked or dismissed, when duty is framed as weakness, when commitment is treated as negotiable depending on mood. Stoicism cuts through that fog and asks a harder question. Are you living in accordance with your role or running from it? Respect cannot survive where obligations are treated as optional, and marriage cannot thrive when roles are constantly renegotiated based on feelings rather than principles. This doesn't mean stagnation. Stoicism is not nostalgia, it's realism. Roles can adapt, but they cannot vanish without consequence. When respect for them disappears entirely, marriage becomes a contest of wills instead of a union of purpose. Epictetus taught, if you want something good, get it from yourself. Applied here, it means discipline must precede demands. If respect is desired, it must be modeled through consistency, accountability, and restraint, not through slogans, not through entitlement. You're living in a time where responsibility is often reframed as burden, and tradition is caricatured as outdated without being examined. But Stoicism teaches you to test ideas by their outcomes, not their popularity. Ask yourself, does abandoning structure produce stronger unions or more fragile ones? Does rejecting roles create peace or constant friction? Wisdom requires the courage to answer honestly, even when the answer isn't fashionable. Now comes the part where you take responsibility for your own alignment. You can't control cultural tides, but you can control the standards you live by. One practical exercise is role clarity reflection. Sit quietly and write what you believe marriage requires to function well, not what feels good, but what endures pressure. Write the responsibilities that must be carried consistently for trust to exist. This isn't about blame, it's about clarity. Wrote, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Apply that to expectations. Strip away confusion. Keep only what is necessary. Another exercise is discipline before dialogue. Before discussing expectations or frustrations, ask yourself whether you are fully living up to your own duties. Stoicism demands self-scrutiny first. Seneca advised, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." Wasted effort in marriage often comes from trying to change the other person before mastering your own conduct. Respect grows where self-mastery is visible. You're not meant to fight modernity blindly, nor surrender to it passively. You're meant to stand rooted. Traditional marital roles existed to channel human nature, not suppress it. When respect for that wisdom erodes, marriage loses its orientation. And without orientation, even love becomes unstable. Stoicism reminds you that endurance is built on structure, not impulse. So take this moment seriously, not with anger, not with bitterness, with resolve. Decide what kind of marriage you believe is worth preserving. Decide what responsibilities you will honor regardless of trends. Decide to act with discipline when others act with confusion. Wrote, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." That single line can rebuild more than arguments ever will. Marriage does not survive on feelings alone. It survives on order, respect, and shared responsibility. When respect for roles disappears, so does the glue that holds everything together. If you want something stronger, live in a way that supports it. Structure your conduct, respect duty, choose discipline over drift. And remember, tradition wasn't built by accident. It was forged by centuries of hard lessons. Ignoring those lessons doesn't make you free, it makes you fragile. Number 5, constant comparison to other couples, creating chronic dissatisfaction. Constant comparison is a quiet, corrosive force. It doesn't arrive loudly or announce its intentions. It slips in as a habit of measurement, a reflex of scanning, a subtle itch that asks, "Is this enough?" And over time, that question reshapes how you experience marriage. Stoicism warned about this long before algorithms learned to monetize envy. Wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." The moment's satisfaction depends on how your relationship stacks up against others. Your peace is no longer yours. It's outsourced. And once comparison becomes constant, dissatisfaction becomes chronic. You're not comparing to reality. You're comparing to curated illusions, selective highlights, idealized narratives. Even when the mind knows this intellectually, the emotional body still reacts. Comparison trains you to overlook what is stable, loyal, and quietly meaningful, and instead fixate on what appears more exciting, more expressive, more validating elsewhere. Stoicism calls this a failure of judgment, not circumstance. Epictetus was blunt. If you admire something external, you make yourself its slave. When marriage becomes evaluated through external benchmarks, it stops being a practice of commitment and becomes a scoreboard. And scoreboards always produce anxiety. The deeper issue isn't comparison itself, but what it does to desire. It fragments it. Instead of wanting to build depth, you begin wanting options. Instead of cultivating appreciation, you begin scanning for upgrades. That shift poisons intimacy because intimacy requires presence, not perpetual evaluation. The Stoics emphasized attention as a moral act. Where you direct your focus determines your character. Reminded himself, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. A mind trained on comparison will inevitably tint marriage with dissatisfaction, no matter how much stability exists. Comparison also creates a false sense of entitlement. When you constantly observe other couples and measure against them, you unconsciously assume that happiness is something owed to you in a particular shape. If your marriage doesn't match that imagined standard, resentment begins to ferment. Stoicism rejects this mindset entirely. Seneca wrote, "He who suffers before it is necessary, suffers more than is necessary." Chronic dissatisfaction is often suffering borrowed from imagined alternatives, not from actual deprivation. The marriage isn't failing. The perception is restless. What makes this especially destructive is that comparison never ends. There is no finish line. There will always be something newer, louder, more impressive, more romanticized. If satisfaction depends on relative ranking, you're signing up for lifelong discontent. Stoicism offers a different axis: internal alignment. Is the relationship fostering virtue? Is it cultivating patience, loyalty, restraint, honesty? Those are Stoic measures of success, and they don't fluctuate with trends or external validation. When you abandon those measures, marriage turns into a performance rather than a discipline. You must understand this clearly. Dissatisfaction fueled by comparison is not accidental, it is trained. Every time you entertain the thought that something elsewhere would be better, you reinforce the habit. Epictetus taught that freedom begins with governing impressions. You don't control what appears in your mind, but you control what you agree with. When the impulse to compare arises, that is your moment of choice. You either feed it or starve it. One path leads to gratitude, the other leads to erosion. Stoicism doesn't ask you to suppress desire. It asks you to refine it, to desire what is worthy of desire. Wrote, "Do not indulge in dreams of having what you have not, but reckon the chief of the blessings you do possess." Chronic comparison does the opposite. It trains you to mentally live elsewhere while physically remaining where you are. That split creates emotional absence. Over time, that absence feels like emptiness. And emptiness gets mislabeled as unhappiness with marriage, when it is actually disconnection from the present. There's also a subtle disrespect embedded in constant comparison. It treats commitment as provisional, conditional on outperforming imagined alternatives. Stoicism places honor in steadfastness. Seneca argued that loyalty to chosen duties is the foundation of a stable life. When marriage becomes subject to endless comparison, it loses its sacredness. It becomes a consumer choice rather than a vow. And consumer logic is brutal. It always promises more and delivers less. To reverse this pattern, you need to retrain attention, not through force but through discipline. One practical exercise is deliberate sufficiency. Each day, intentionally name what is already enough. Not what could be improved, not what is missing, what is sufficient. This conditions the mind away from scarcity. Another exercise is impression fasting. When comparison thoughts arise, do not argue with them. Simply label them. This is comparison, not truth. Then return your attention to what is directly in front of you. Epictetus emphasized this skill relentlessly, separating impressions from judgments. You can also practice Stoic contrast, but inwardly. Instead of comparing outward to others, compare your present self to your former self. Ask whether your conduct today reflects greater patience, fairness, and self-control than before. This redirects ambition toward character, not optics. Urged himself, be satisfied with even the smallest progress and treat the result of it as no small matter. Satisfaction grows when progress is measured internally. Marriage cannot survive in a mind addicted to alternatives. It thrives in a mind committed to cultivation. Constant comparison turns partners into competitors with fantasies. Stoicism turns marriage into a training ground for virtue. One produces dissatisfaction, the other produces steadiness. The difference is not luck, it is practice. So act deliberately. Audit your mental habits. Remove the quiet comparisons you've normalized. Replace them with conscious appreciation and chosen loyalty. Not because it's easy, but because it's stabilizing. Chronic dissatisfaction isn't solved by finding something better. It's dissolved by learning to value what you've already chosen. And when you do that, comparison loses its grip and marriage regains its center, not as a spectacle, but as a disciplined, enduring bond. Number 6, confusing empowerment with avoidance of accountability. There's a subtle confusion shaping modern relationships, and it's doing quiet damage to marriage. Empowerment has been redefined as freedom from accountability rather than mastery of responsibility. At first glance, that sounds like strength, independence, self-assertion. But Stoicism asks you to look deeper past the slogans and emotions into the long-term consequences of how ideas are lived, not how they sound. Warned, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Empowerment that dissolves accountability may feel liberating in the moment, but it slowly corrodes trust, stability, and the very structure that makes marriage endure. You live in a time where personal fulfillment is often framed as the highest good. If something feels restrictive, uncomfortable, or demanding, it's labeled oppressive. Commitment becomes negotiable. Responsibility is recast as limitation. But marriage, by its nature, is not built on endless self-expression. It is built on self-governance, on the willingness to be answerable for choices, emotions, and promises, especially when doing so is inconvenient. Stoicism never taught escape from duty. It taught elevation through it. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." Accountability is not the enemy of freedom, it is the condition for it. When empowerment is stripped of accountability, it becomes fragile. It depends on validation, external approval, and the ability to exit whenever friction appears. Marriage, however, exposes friction by design. It reveals character under pressure. It asks you to regulate emotion rather than obey it, to repair rather than replace, to reflect rather than react. Avoidance dressed up as empowerment teaches the opposite habit. It trains you to walk away instead of work through, to justify instead of examine, to protect ego instead of integrity. Over time, that mindset doesn't just weaken marriage, it weakens the self. Stoicism is relentless on this point. You are responsible not for what you feel, but for what you do with what you feel. Reminded himself daily, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Accountability begins there. Not in blaming structures, expectations, or partners, but in owning reactions, choices, and patterns. Marriage collapses when accountability is outsourced, when responsibility is always external, and introspection is treated as optional. This confusion also distorts the meaning of equality. Equality does not mean symmetry of desire without symmetry of duty. It does not mean autonomy without obligation. True equality in marriage is mutual accountability, two people willing to hold themselves to standards even when no one is forcing them to. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." Courage in marriage looks like staying present when it would be easier to disengage, like admitting fault without theatrics, like choosing repair over righteous exit. You don't need louder voices or sharper defenses. You need clarity. Empowerment that cannot coexist with accountability is not empowerment at all, it is avoidance with better branding. And avoidance always charges interest. It shows up later as instability, resentment, and fractured trust. Marriage requires delayed gratification, emotional regulation, and the humility to be wrong. These are Stoic virtues, not outdated constraints. They are the architecture of endurance. If you want to build something that lasts, you must retrain how you interpret discomfort. Discomfort is not a signal to escape. It is information. It tells you where growth is required. Stoicism teaches you to sit with that signal, not silence it. Epictetus advised, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Accountability is embodiment. It is choosing disciplined response over impulsive justification, again and again. Here is a simple but demanding exercise. Write down, privately and honestly, the moments where your first instinct is deflection rather than reflection. Not to shame yourself, but to see your habits clearly. Then ask one question: what part of this is within my control? Not what someone else did, not what society says, just you. Repeat this daily. Over time, accountability stops feeling like pressure and starts feeling like power. Another practice, emotional ownership. When strong emotion arises, pause before acting. Name the emotion silently. Breathe. Then decide your response based on your values, not your impulse. Practice this relentlessly. This discipline is not suppression, it is leadership of the self first. Marriage cannot survive without self-leadership. You are not losing power by being accountable. You are consolidating it. The ability to stay, to work, to repair, to be answerable. This is rare strength in an age that celebrates exit. Stoicism does not promise ease. It promises clarity. And clarity reveals that marriage is not ruined by responsibility, but by its absence. If empowerment is real, it should make you more capable of commitment, not less. More reliable, not more elusive. More grounded, not perpetually self-protective. Anything else is a misunderstanding that feels good briefly and costs dearly over time. Seneca said, "No person has the power to have everything they want, but it is in their power not to want what they don't have." Marriage demands that kind of maturity, the discipline to choose depth over endless options. So act differently. Choose accountability as a daily practice, not a threat. Let empowerment mean mastery of self, not escape from responsibility. Marriage does not need perfection. It needs people strong enough to be answerable for who they are becoming. And that strength, cultivated calmly and consistently, is what keeps foundations from cracking when pressure inevitably arrives. Number 7. Emotional decision-making, overriding patience and long-term thinking. There's a pattern you need to look at calmly, without anger, without bitterness, and without pretending it doesn't exist. When emotional decision-making overrides patience and long-term thinking, marriage stops being a covenant and turns into a reaction. Stoicism has always warned against this. Wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." When emotions are allowed to steer permanent decisions, that power is surrendered. And no long-term institution can survive being governed by momentary feelings. You've been taught directly and indirectly that emotions are always valid, that if something feels heavy or uncomfortable, it must be escaped. But feelings are weather, not truth. They shift, they intensify, they pass. Marriage, on the other hand, is built on endurance, restraint, and the ability to think beyond the present moment. When impatience replaces perspective, commitment starts to feel like a burden instead of a responsibility. And when short-term emotional relief becomes the goal, long-term stability quietly collapses. Stoicism never emotion. It emotions right to rule. Epictetus made this distinction clear. Do not let the force of the impression carry you away. Emotional impulses are impressions. They are not commands. Yet modern conditioning encourages acting first and rationalizing later. When frustration, dissatisfaction, or restlessness appears, the reflex is often immediate action instead of reflection. Decisions that should be filtered through time, reason, and consequence are rushed through the narrow gate of feeling. Marriage cannot survive that compression. You need to understand something crucial here. Emotional decision-making isn't strength. It's not authenticity, it's reactivity. And reactivity is the opposite of maturity. Patience requires discipline. Long-term thinking requires humility. Both demand that you tolerate discomfort without escaping it. Seneca warned, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." When patience is abandoned, growth is abandoned with it. What's especially destructive is the belief that happiness must be constant. And if it isn't, something must be wrong with the structure rather than the mindset. Marriage was never meant to be an uninterrupted emotional high. It's a framework for building character, stability, and shared purpose over time. When emotions are treated as final judges instead of passing signals, dissatisfaction is mistaken for failure. And instead of slowing down to examine oneself, the impulse is to exit. Stoicism asks you to pause before you act, especially when emotions are loud. Practice this relentlessly. He reminded himself, calm is the cradle of power. Calm allows you to see beyond the present feeling. It stretches your perception forward into consequences you don't yet feel but will eventually live with. Emotional decision-making shrinks your vision. It locks you into now. And marriage demands a future-oriented mind. This doesn't mean suppressing emotion. It means subordinating it to reason. Feelings are information, not instruction. They tell you something is happening internally, not what must be done externally. When patience disappears, emotional spikes start dictating permanent outcomes. That's when vows become conditional and commitment becomes negotiable. Over time, this erodes trust, not just between partners but within oneself. Here, where responsibility enters. Stoicism places responsibility squarely on the individual. You are accountable for how you interpret, regulate, and act on emotion. You don't get to outsource that responsibility to circumstances. Epictetus said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." If you believe every emotion deserves immediate action, there's nothing left to learn, only damage to manage. To counter this, you need to train patience like a muscle. Start with delayed response. When emotion rises, do nothing immediately. Not because you're avoiding, but because you're choosing clarity. Give yourself space. Let the feeling run its course without attaching a decision to it. Most emotions peak and fade if you don't feed them with action. This alone rewires your relationship with impulse. Another practice is future anchoring. When you feel driven to act emotionally, ask yourself one question: will this decision still make sense to me in 5 years? Not in 5 days. Not after the emotion settles. 5 years. Constantly pulled his mind forward in time to escape the tyranny of the moment. This habit alone restores perspective. You should also practice emotional labeling without identification. Say to yourself, "I am experiencing frustration," not "I am frustrated." This subtle shift creates distance. You stop becoming the emotion and start observing it. Seneca wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." Observation dissolves exaggeration, and exaggeration is what drives reckless decisions. Marriage requires long-range thinking because it's not built for convenience. It's built for continuity. When emotional comfort becomes the highest value, sacrifice feels unjust, patience feels pointless, and endurance feels outdated. But Stoicism teaches you that endurance is not suffering. It's sovereignty. It's the ability to remain steady while everything inside you urges movement. This isn't about blame. It's about patterns. And patterns only change when awareness replaces impulse. If emotions are always obeyed, they will eventually demand more than they give. But when emotions are respected without being, they become manageable, useful even. So here's your challenge. For the next 30 days, commit to one rule: no major decisions made under emotional intensity. None. Write it down. Hold yourself to it. During that time, journal daily about what you feel without acting on it. Let patience stretch your nervous system. Let time do what emotion cannot clarify. Said the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice. You could reframe that. The best protection is to be unlike the impulse that tries to rule you. Emotional decision-making may feel powerful in the moment, but it leaves ruins behind. Patience builds quietly. Long-term thinking compounds, and marriage, if it is to survive, demands both. Calm yourself. Slow down. Choose reason over reaction, not because emotion is evil, but because discipline is necessary. The future rewards those who can endure the present without destroying what they once promised to protect. Number 8, reduce tolerance for hardship, boredom, and routine phases of marriage. There's a quiet shift happening that most people don't want to name out loud, and it revolves around tolerance. Not tolerance for opinions or preferences, but tolerance for hardship, boredom, and routine, the very phases that marriage inevitably moves through. When that tolerance erodes, Commitment starts to feel optional instead of sacred. The Stoics understood something modern culture keeps trying to escape. A meaningful life is not a constant stream of stimulation. Wrote, ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? Marriage demands that same question, not when things are exciting, but when they are ordinary, repetitive, and unglamorous. You've been conditioned to expect perpetual emotional highs, constant novelty, endless validation. When marriage settles into rhythm, many interpret that rhythm as failure instead of stability. Reduced tolerance for discomfort makes routine feel like a threat. But routine is not decay, it's structure. It's the ground where trust, loyalty, and shared purpose quietly grow. The Stoics didn't seek excitement, they sought steadiness. Seneca warned, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity." For he is not permitted to prove himself. Marriage is one of the few institutions that still asks you to prove yourself through endurance rather than escape. Hardship is not a flaw in marriage, it's a feature. It exposes character. When tolerance is low, even mild difficulty feels unbearable. Small frustrations start to feel like existential problems. Boredom gets misread as incompatibility. Routine gets labeled as stagnation. But Stoicism teaches you that your reactions reveal more than the situation itself. Epictetus said, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." When tolerance disappears, reaction replaces responsibility. Instead of asking how to grow through a phase, the instinct becomes how to exit it. You live in a culture that glorifies feelings over principles. When feelings dip, commitment is questioned. But feelings were never meant to carry the weight of a lifelong bond. They fluctuate, they fatigue, they repeat themselves, principles endure. The Stoics built their lives around this idea, reminded himself daily, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Marriage tests this power relentlessly. It asks you to stay grounded when things feel dull, to stay disciplined when motivation fades, and to stay loyal when novelty whispers alternatives. Reduced tolerance also reveals an avoidance of responsibility. Routine demands consistency. It asks you to show up without applause, to invest without immediate reward, to remain present when nothing dramatic is happening. That's uncomfortable for a mind trained on instant gratification. But Stoicism insists that growth happens precisely in these quiet stretches. Seneca wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." When boredom appears, it's not an enemy. It's a signal inviting maturity. You don't need constant excitement to feel alive. That belief is a trap. A life, or marriage, built on stimulation alone becomes fragile. The moment stimulation drops, dissatisfaction rushes in. Stoicism offers an alternative, contentment rooted in discipline and purpose. Routine becomes meaningful when you understand why you're enduring it. Marriage is not about being entertained. It's about building something stable enough to withstand time, stress, and human imperfection. There's also a deeper psychological cost to reduced tolerance. When hardship is avoided, resilience never develops. Each challenge feels heavier than the last. You begin to believe peace should be effortless, but peace is practiced. It's trained. Didn't wait for ease, he cultivated calm in chaos. Marriage requires the same inner training. If you treat every low phase as a warning sign instead of a training ground, you'll never develop the endurance marriage demands. This is where you're called to act differently, not by forcing happiness, but by redefining success. Success in marriage isn't the absence of boredom, it's the ability to remain grounded through it. It's choosing steadiness over stimulation, principle over impulse, long-term meaning over short-term relief. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." If you want a marriage that lasts, you must become someone who can tolerate stillness, repetition, and discomfort without interpreting them as failure. Here's a practical exercise to build this tolerance. Each day, deliberately do one thing that feels routine or mildly uncomfortable without trying to escape it mentally. Don't rush it. Don't distract yourself. Just stay present. This trains your nervous system to stop panicking when stimulation drops. Another exercise is reflection without judgment. At the end of the day, ask yourself, did I respond to discomfort with discipline or avoidance? Write the answer honestly. This is how Stoics sharpen their character, through daily self-examination, not emotional indulgence. You can also practice reframing boredom. Instead of labeling it as emptiness, label it as stability, as peace without fireworks. Seneca wrote, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future." Routine gives you that chance. It removes chaos. It offers predictability, but only if you stop demanding that every moment entertain you. Marriage was never meant to be easy, and it was never meant to be exciting all the time. It was meant to be formative. It shapes patience. It reveals selfishness. It strengthens discipline. Reduced tolerance for hardship doesn't just damage marriage, it weakens character. When you learn to endure routine without resentment, you don't just save a relationship. You build inner strength that carries into every area of life. So take responsibility for your tolerance, train it, expand it. Stop mistaking discomfort for disaster. Stop equating boredom with failure. Learn to stand firm in the quiet phases. Said, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. In this case, the injury is modern impatience. Be unlike it. Choose endurance. Choose principle. Choose depth over novelty. Marriage doesn't collapse because of hardship. It collapses when tolerance disappears. Build yours deliberately. Practice it daily. And you'll discover something most never do. What you once called boring was actually peace, waiting for you to grow into it. Number 9, validation seeking outside the marriage, undermining loyalty and trust. There's a quiet erosion happening in modern marriage, and it doesn't begin with betrayal or dramatic exits. It begins with something far more subtle, the hunger to be seen, affirmed, admired by people who are not part of the marital bond. Validation seeking outside the marriage doesn't always look like disloyalty at first. It often disguises itself as harmless attention, innocent reassurance, or emotional relief. But Stoicism teaches you to judge actions not by how they appear, but by what they train your character to become. Warned, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. When attention drifts outward, loyalty weakens inwardly, and trust begins to thin long before it breaks. Marriage demands containment, not confinement but containment, a conscious choice to direct emotional energy inward instead of scattering it outward. When validation is repeatedly sourced from outside eyes, outside approval, outside affirmation, it signals a fracture in commitment. You may tell yourself it's nothing, that it doesn't change how you feel at home, but habits shape identity. Epictetus made this clear. No man is free who is not master of himself. If your sense of worth depends on external applause, you are no longer sovereign. And when sovereignty fades, so does fidelity. Not just physical fidelity, but emotional loyalty. Trust in marriage is built on predictability of intention. Your partner needs to know where your emotional gravity lives. When validation is sought elsewhere, even subtly, that gravity shifts. The marriage becomes one source among many instead of the anchor. Stoicism places enormous importance on loyalty to roles. Reminded himself daily that he was a son, a citizen, a leader, and that each role carried duties. Marriage is no different. It is a role that demands discipline, not just feeling. When validation is outsourced, discipline is replaced by impulse, and impulse is never a reliable guardian of trust. What makes this so destructive is not the attention itself, but the internal permission it requires. To seek validation outside the marriage, you must first tell yourself that your partner's presence is insufficient. That narrative, repeated quietly, reshapes how you show up. Seneca wrote, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." When your emotional focus is scattered, your commitment loses depth. Loyalty cannot survive diffusion. It needs concentration. It needs deliberate restraint. It needs you to say no to attention that flatters the ego but starves the bond. Stoicism does not condemn desire. It demands order. Desire without hierarchy leads to chaos. Marriage places a clear hierarchy on intimacy and affirmation. When that order is disrupted, resentment grows on both sides. Even if unspoken, the imbalance is felt. Trust erodes not because of what is proven, but because of what is sensed. Humans are remarkably sensitive to divided presence. You can feel when someone is no longer fully with you. And once that feeling sets in, repair becomes difficult. There is also a deeper psychological cost. Validation seeking trains you to measure your worth by reaction rather than by principle. That's a dangerous trade. Wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Marriage requires that strength. It asks you to ground your self-worth internally and relationally, not socially and externally. When affirmation becomes addictive, loyalty becomes negotiable. Not because you intend harm, but because you've taught yourself that attention is oxygen. This is where responsibility matters. Stoicism is brutally honest about agency. You are not compelled to seek validation elsewhere. You choose it even if unconsciously, and every choice reinforces a pattern. The pattern eventually becomes character. The character shapes the marriage. This is not about blame, it's about causality. If you want trust, you must behave in ways that make trust rational. If you want loyalty, you must stop feeding impulses that compete with it. Now comes the corrective work. Not dramatic vows, not speeches, habits. Start by practicing validation containment. Make a daily decision to redirect the urge for external affirmation back into self-respect and marital presence. When you feel the pull to be noticed, pause, ask yourself, what am I actually seeking right now? Approval, reassurance, or escape? Numbing the desire weakens it. Epictetus taught, if you do not want to be disturbed, do not let yourself be carried away by impressions. This pause is how you regain control. Another practice is internal sufficiency training. Each day, affirm your own worth based on virtue, not attention. Write down one action you took that aligned with integrity, discipline, or loyalty. This rewires your validation source. Seneca advised nightly self-examination for this exact reason. When you validate yourself through principle, the craving for external approval loses intensity. You should also practice relational investment. Direct deliberate attention back into the marriage, not to extract validation, but to contribute stability. Stoicism emphasizes contribution over consumption. Wrote, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee." Validation seeking outside the marriage benefits the ego, not the union. Redirecting energy inward strengthens the structure that actually supports you long-term. Understand this clearly. Marriage does not collapse overnight. It erodes through permission slips. Permission to seek attention. Permission to feel entitled to affirmation without responsibility. Permission to prioritize feeling admired over being trustworthy. Stoicism cuts through this fog by asking one simple question. Is this within my control, and does it align with virtue? If the answer is no, restraint becomes the only rational choice. If you want to protect marriage, you must protect loyalty at the level of thought, not just action. You must guard where your attention goes, where your ego feeds, and where your sense of worth is anchored. This is not suppression. It is self-command. And self-command is the foundation of any lasting bond. So take this seriously. Audit your habits. Reduce exposure to attention that competes with commitment. Strengthen your internal validation. Practice discipline quietly. Marriage survives not because of passion alone, but because of daily, almost invisible choices that reinforce trust. Choose containment over craving. Choose loyalty over applause. Choose virtue over impulse. As the Stoics understood, a stable life is built not by indulging every desire but by mastering them. Number 10, treating marriage as an extraterritorial arrangement rather than a lifelong bond. Treating marriage as an extraterritorial arrangement rather than a lifelong bond quietly rewires the entire meaning of commitment, and you can feel the consequences long before anyone says the word divorce. When marriage is entered with one foot already near the door, it stops being a vow and starts becoming a conditional contract. Stoicism teaches you that what you prepare for internally is what you eventually create externally. Warned, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. When the dominant thought behind marriage is escape instead of endurance, the relationship absorbs that fragility. You don't build something strong while constantly rehearsing how to leave it. You live in a culture that celebrates options, not obligations. Freedom is praised, permanence is questioned, and endurance is often mistaken for weakness. But Stoicism never confused freedom with avoidance. Epictetus was clear. First learn the meaning of what you say and then speak. When marriage is treated as something you can exit the moment it feels uncomfortable, the words "for better or worse" lose their weight. Commitment becomes performative. Loyalty becomes temporary. And trust, real trust, never fully forms because both people sense that the ground beneath them is conditional. You don't protect something you believe is disposable. That's the quiet danger. When marriage becomes extraterritorial, effort becomes selective, patience shortens, forgiveness becomes rare, discipline erodes. Why struggle through discomfort if you've already decided discomfort is a reason to leave? Stoicism teaches the opposite approach. Seneca wrote, "Fire tests gold, misfortune tests brave men." Marriage was never designed to be a comfort machine. It is a refinement process. When you remove endurance from the equation, you remove the very mechanism that deepens character and connection. This mindset doesn't announce itself loudly. It hides behind language like knowing your worth, keeping options open, or not settling. But Stoicism asks a sharper question. Does this belief make you more virtuous or more avoidant? A lifelong bond requires the courage to stay present when things stop being flattering. Extraterritorial thinking trains you to monitor satisfaction instead of cultivate responsibility. And responsibility, not constant happiness, is what creates stability over time. Reminded himself daily, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Treating marriage as temporary hands your power over to moods, impulses, and fluctuations. You become governed by how you feel today instead of what you committed to uphold tomorrow. That doesn't create partnership. It creates negotiation fatigue. One person becomes the evaluator, the other the performer. Love cannot survive long in that dynamic. Stoicism never promised ease, it promised meaning. A lifelong bond asks you to grow instead of flee, to regulate instead of retaliate, to stay rooted instead of scanning for exits. When marriage is approached as permanent, behavior changes naturally. You invest differently, you speak differently, you resolve conflict differently. Permanence forces maturity. Temporariness encourages entitlement. That's not a moral judgment, it's a psychological law. If you sense resistance rising as you read this, pause. That resistance is worth examining. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." The modern world may call lifelong commitment outdated, risky, or naive. Stoicism calls it disciplined, courageous, deliberate. The Stoic doesn't fear commitment because the Stoic has already accepted that hardship is part of life. You don't enter marriage expecting constant ease. You enter it expecting responsibility. Here's the uncomfortable truth. When exit is always available, effort becomes optional. And optional effort breeds decay. Not all at once, slowly, quietly. Respect thins, intimacy dulls, gratitude fades. This isn't because people are cruel, it's because humans rise to the standards they set internally. If the standard is, I'll stay as long as it feels good, the moment it doesn't, disengagement feels justified. Stoicism asks you to hold a higher internal bar, regardless of external validation. Now, this doesn't mean enduring abuse or abandoning self-respect. Stoicism never advocates self-destruction. It advocates wisdom. The distinction matters. Lifelong bond does not mean blind tolerance. It means you enter marriage with the understanding that difficulty is not evidence of failure. It's evidence of life unfolding. Seneca wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity." Marriage, when treated seriously, is one of the great arenas where character is tested and refined. To realign your mindset, you must train it deliberately. Start with this exercise. Write down what marriage means to you when comfort is removed from the definition. Not happiness, not excitement. Strip it down to responsibility, duty, and shared endurance. Sit with the discomfort that arises. That discomfort is where growth begins. Another practice is daily restraint. When frustration surfaces, resist the urge to mentally withdraw. Instead, practice staying present without rehearsing escape. Practice this discipline constantly, reminding himself, do not be overheard complaining, not even to yourself. You also need to examine the stories you consume. Are they feeding endurance or escape? Stoicism teaches you to guard the mind fiercely. What you normalize internally becomes what you tolerate externally. If exit is glorified, permanence feels suffocating. But when endurance is honored, commitment becomes stabilizing instead of threatening. Marriage was never meant to be an emotional emergency exit. It was meant to be a structure strong enough to hold two imperfect people through time. When that structure is weakened by exit-ready thinking, the entire institution trembles. Not because people are incapable, but because they're undertrained in endurance. Stoicism offers that training quietly and relentlessly. So take responsibility for your mindset. Decide what kind of bond you believe in before you enter one. Train yourself to stay when it's easier to leave. Discipline your thoughts before they discipline your actions. Because when marriage is treated as a lifelong bond, not an escape plan, something rare happens. Trust deepens, character strengthens, and stability becomes possible again. As said, what we do now echoes in eternity. Choose commitment with intention, not because it's easy, but because it's worthy of you. Before you click away, understand this. Marriage was never meant to survive on emotion alone. The Stoics warned us, if you are ruled by pleasure, you are not free. What you're seeing today isn't the collapse of marriage itself, but the collapse of discipline, accountability, and shared responsibility. When comfort replaces character, commitment becomes fragile. When feelings become law, vows become optional. This video wasn't made to attack, it was made to wake you up. Because if you understand why marriage is failing, you gain the power to protect yourself from repeating the same mistakes. Most men walk into marriage unprepared, hoping love will carry what structure should have built. It won't, and it never has. Remember this, you don't need to be loud, angry, or resentful. You need to be clear about your values, clear about boundaries, clear about the kind of life you are willing or unwilling to live. The man who knows this cannot be manipulated, rushed, or emotionally cornered. If this video challenged you, that's a good sign. Sit with it, reflect on it, and most importantly, apply it. Because awareness without action changes nothing. If you want more Stoic truths that sharpen your judgment, strengthen your masculinity, and protect your future, subscribe, like, and share this with a man who needs to hear it. This might be the knowledge that saves him before it's too late. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. What if I told you that some of the confusion, frustration, and self-doubt you've experienced in dating had nothing to do with your worth? and everything to do with psychological games you didn't even realize were being played. What if those moments where her behavior suddenly shifted, warm one day, distant the next, weren't random at all, but subtle tests designed to measure your emotional control, confidence, and boundaries? Most men lose not because they lack attraction, intelligence, or effort, but because they react unconsciously. They chase clarity, seek reassurance, or over-explain, unknowingly giving away their power. And the more they react, the more the dynamic slips out of their control. Stoic philosophy teaches mastery of the self before mastery of situations. When you understand the mind games, you stop taking things personally. You stop reacting emotionally. You see clearly, and clarity is leverage. In this video, you'll learn 8 female mind games every man must recognize, not to manipulate, but to protect your composure, your self-respect, and your peace of mind. Each point builds on the last, and the final one ties everything together in a way most men never see coming. Watch this video till the very end. Miss one insight and you miss the pattern, and once you see the pattern, you'll never be played the same way again. Number 1. Hot and cold attention. Hot and cold attention works because it doesn't attack your confidence directly, it erodes it quietly. One moment you feel chosen, seen, pulled in, the next distance, silence. A subtle withdrawal that leaves you replaying everything in your head. And if you're not aware of what's happening, your mind starts doing the work for her. You analyze, you guess, you adjust, you lean forward, not because you want to, but because uncertainty feels uncomfortable and the nervous system wants relief. That's the hook. The Stoics warned about this long before modern psychology gave it a name. Epictetus said, "Men are disturbed not by things but by the views they take of them." Hot and cold attention is powerful because it hijacks your interpretation. You stop responding to reality and start responding to fluctuations. Your internal state becomes dependent on external signals. And the moment that happens, your center shifts outside yourself. That's when you're no longer choosing, you're reacting. You need to understand this clearly. Inconsistency creates attachment, not connection. It creates emotional tension that your mind tries to resolve. When warmth appears after distance, it feels amplified. When distance follows warmth, it feels heavier than it should. This cycle trains you to wait, to hope, to monitor. And over time, you begin to abandon your own rhythm just to stay aligned with someone else's unpredictable pace. That's not attraction anymore. That's conditioning. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. Read that again, slowly. Hot and cold only works if you overvalue access. If attention becomes scarce and you treat it like currency, you'll start negotiating with yourself. You'll tolerate confusion. You'll lower boundaries. You'll call patience what is really self-betrayal. Calm awareness breaks the pattern instantly, not by confrontation, but by refusal to be emotionally yanked around. Here, where action begins. The first habit you must adopt is emotional consistency, not toward others, toward yourself. Decide that your internal state will no longer rise and fall based on someone else's availability. That doesn't mean becoming cold or detached. It means regulated, stable, grounded. Seneca said, "A man who is a slave to pleasure will be a slave to fear." Hot and cold attention plays on both. Pleasure when warmth returns, fear when it disappears. Your job is to step out of that loop. The second habit is pace control. Stop matching intensity. Stop mirroring distance or enthusiasm automatically. Move at your own speed. If attention fades, don't chase clarity. Let the space exist without filling it. This isn't a tactic, it's a discipline. You're training your nervous system to tolerate uncertainty without scrambling to fix it. And the more you do that, the less power inconsistency has over you. You also need to audit your internal dialogue. Notice how quickly your mind tries to assign meaning to fluctuations. Something changed. I did something wrong. I need to re-engage. These thoughts feel automatic, but they're not facts, they're habits. Epictetus reminded us, it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. Challenge those assumptions. Replace them with neutrality, not optimism, not pessimism, neutrality. A powerful daily exercise is this. When attention shifts, do nothing for 24 hours. No emotional adjustments, no narrative building, just observation. Let your body feel the discomfort without turning it into action. Most men have never practiced this. They confuse stillness with weakness. In reality, stillness is strength. It's the refusal to be emotionally hurted. Another exercise is internal validation training. Each day, write down one decision you stood by without seeking reassurance. One moment you didn't explain yourself. One pause you allowed to exist. This builds self-trust. And self-trust is the antidote to hot and cold dynamics. When you trust yourself, unpredictability loses its sting. You should also redefine what attention means to you. Attention is not proof of value, it's a behavior, a fluctuating one. Warned, do not waste the remainder of your life in thoughts about others. Yet hot and cold attention pulls you exactly there, into preoccupation. Pull yourself back. Your focus is your power. Where you place it determines who leads the emotional frame. Here's the paradox. The moment you stop being affected by inconsistency, it either disappears or reveals itself clearly. You no longer need to decode it. You no longer need to manage it. You simply observe and decide, calmly, without resentment, without urgency. That's what makes you. This isn't about playing harder to get. It's about becoming harder to destabilize. When your emotions are no longer tethered to external warmth or distance, your presence changes. You stop leaning forward during warmth. You stop collapsing during cold. You remain steady. And steadiness is deeply unsettling to manipulation because it offers no leverage. Seneca put it plainly, he suffers more than necessary who suffers before it is necessary. Don't suffer imagined loss. Don't inflate silence into rejection. Don't turn fluctuation into a verdict on your worth. Instead, return to yourself. Regulate your breath. Slow your reactions. Maintain your pace. Hot and cold attention only works on men who abandon their center. Keep yours. Practice emotional economy. Let attention come and go without turning it into meaning. And remember, real attraction grows where there is calm, not confusion. The moment you stop feeding the cycle, you step out of the game entirely. And that's where your power has always been. Number 2, silent treatment as control. The silent treatment works because it preys on one thing most people haven't mastered: emotional independence. When words disappear, your mind rushes to fill the gap. You replay conversations. You search for mistakes. You imagine consequences. That internal noise is the leverage. Silence becomes control not because it's powerful on its own, but because you hand it power the moment you start chasing relief. And if you're honest, you felt that pull before, the urge to fix, to clarify, to restore connection at any cost. That's the trap. Stoic philosophy cuts straight through this. Epictetus said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. Read that again. The silence itself isn't the weapon, your reaction to it is. When you scramble for resolution, you communicate that your emotional balance depends on someone else's behavior. That dependence quietly flips the dynamic. Control shifts. Respect thins. And the more you push for reassurance, the deeper the silence digs in. Here's the part most men misunderstand. The silent treatment isn't always conscious cruelty. Often it's avoidance mixed with a need for leverage. But intent doesn't matter nearly as much as effect. When silence is used to create anxiety, to induce compliance, or to extract emotional labor, it becomes a power move. And power moves only work on people who haven't anchored themselves internally. Reminded himself, choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. That choice begins the moment silence appears. Your first discipline is this: stop interpreting silence as an emergency. Nothing about quiet requires immediate action. The urge to respond, explain, or pursue is conditioned. You can unlearn it. When silence shows up, instead of leaning forward, you stay where you are. You don't withdraw dramatically. You don't escalate. You simply continue living at your normal emotional altitude. This is not indifference, it's stability. And stability neutralizes manipulation faster than confrontation ever could. Notice what happens internally when you don't react. Anxiety spikes, thoughts race. That's not danger, that's withdrawal from validation. Let it pass. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." The mind creates stories in silence. Your job is to refuse the story. No assumptions, no narratives, just facts. There is quiet, that's it. The moment you stop assigning meaning to the silence, it loses its ability to steer you. You must also break the habit of overavailability. If silence makes you chase, it trains the other person, consciously or not. That withdrawal produces pursuit. That's a dangerous pattern. Instead, maintain your routines. Your tone stays even. Your pace stays steady. You don't punish silence, but you don't reward it either. This is what emotional self-respect looks like in practice. Quietly, firmly, without speeches. A powerful exercise to adopt is delayed response training. When you feel compelled to reach out just to ease discomfort, wait 24 hours, not as a tactic, as a discipline. During that time, observe your impulses without obeying them. This strengthens your emotional spine. Another exercise is mental labeling. When anxiety arises, name it. This is discomfort, not urgency. That simple label creates distance. Distance restores choice. Stoicism teaches that control over others is illusion. Control over self is real. Wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Silence is an outside event. Your response is where power lies. When you stop negotiating your peace, silence can no longer bargain with you. And when control fails, it usually dissolves. There's also a deeper layer here. The silent treatment often tests boundaries. It asks, without words, will you abandon yourself to keep connection? Each time you do, you teach the wrong lesson. Each time you don't, you teach a different one. That connection with you requires mutual respect, not emotional pressure. That lesson doesn't need to be spoken. It's felt. You should practice emotional containment daily. This means allowing feelings without acting on them. Sit with discomfort. Let it move through you. You are not your urge to fix things. You are not your fear of disconnection. Epictetus said, "Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do." Acceptance here doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. It means refusing to be destabilized by tactics meant to provoke. Another habit to build is outcome detachment. Silence often tempts you to chase a specific result: clarity, reassurance, control. Let go of that outcome. Focus instead on conduct. Are you calm? Are you respectful to yourself? Are you acting from choice rather than fear? If yes, you're already winning, regardless of what the silence turns into. Understand this clearly. Responding calmly to silence is not weakness. It's strength without noise. It says, I don't need to be pulled off center to stay connected. That energy changes everything. When silence no longer produces urgency, it loses its function. And what loses function eventually fades. This is not about games, it's about grounding. The Stoics didn't teach withdrawal from life, they taught sovereignty within it. When you embody that, manipulation has nowhere to land. As Seneca said, a man who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. Expect silence, prepare for it, and when it comes, meet it with composure. So start now. The next time silence appears, don't fill it, don't fight it, don't fear it. Use it as training, breathe, stay steady, keep your life moving. Let your calm speak. Over time, you'll notice something profound. Silence stops controlling you. And when that happens, you don't need to say much at all. Number 3, jealousy provocation. Jealousy provocation is subtle, almost elegant in how quietly it works. It doesn't arrive as an attack. It arrives as a suggestion, a planted image, a shifted tone, something just vague enough to stir your imagination and pull your attention away from your center. And the moment your emotional state starts reacting instead of observing, the game has already begun. This is why recognizing it matters. Not so you can counter it aggressively, not so you can harden yourself, but so you can stay sovereign over your own inner world. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology put language to it. Epictetus warned, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." Jealousy provocation only works if you accept the invitation to judge, compare, and fear loss. The tactic feeds on insecurity, not because you are weak, but because insecurity is human. The danger is not feeling it. The danger is letting it steer you. The moment you start scanning for threats, seeking reassurance, or subtly competing with imagined rivals, your frame collapses inward. You stop leading yourself. You must see jealousy provocation for what it is, a test of emotional self-command. It's not always conscious. Often it's instinctive, but regardless of intent, the effect is the same. It pulls you out of calm presence and into reactivity, and reactivity is where respect drains away quietly. Wrote, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do, only what you do." Read that again. That line alone neutralizes this entire dynamic. When you stop outsourcing your emotional balance to perceived competition, jealousy has nowhere to land. What makes jealousy provocation so effective is that it disguises itself as information. It presents itself as something you should notice, something you should feel something about. And once you do, your nervous system tightens. Your words shift. Your energy sharpens. You might not say anything, but the internal disturbance leaks through tone, packing, posture. This is why the discipline must be internal. You don't defeat the game by responding differently. You defeat it by not entering. Here's the shift you need to make. Stop interpreting emotional signals as commands. Feelings are data, not directives. The Stoics trained this relentlessly. Seneca wrote, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." Jealousy provocation invites you to suffer in advance, to imagine loss, to imagine replacement, to imagine diminished value, none of which exist in the present moment. When you refuse to project yourself into imagined futures, you reclaim your power. This doesn't mean suppressing emotion. Suppression creates pressure. It leaks later. Instead, you observe. You notice the sensation without acting on it. You let it rise and fall. That alone rewires your internal response. You become less predictable, less emotionally steerable, and predictability is what manipulation relies on. You should begin practicing emotional non-attachment immediately. Not indifference. Non-attachment, there's a difference. Indifference is numbness. Non-attachment is strength. It means you care without clinging. You stay engaged without gripping outcomes. Reminded himself, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. That estimate is yours to revise. A powerful daily exercise is this. When you feel the first spark of jealousy, don't analyze it, don't justify it, don't act on it. Instead, name it silently, just the word. Then return to your breath. This creates space between stimulus and response. That space is freedom. Another practice is internal reaffirmation. Not affirmations shouted into a mirror, but quiet reminders of your standards, your values, your direction. When your self-worth is rooted in who you are becoming rather than how you are being perceived, jealousy loses leverage. You must also break the habit of comparison. Comparison is the fuel source. The Stoics viewed comparison as a distraction from virtue. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." When you embody steadiness, you don't need to measure yourself against anyone else. You move forward. You improve quietly. And improvement, not competition, is what builds unshakable confidence. Another habit to adopt is response minimalism. When you feel tempted to seek clarification, reassurance, or validation, pause. Ask yourself whether your action is rooted in curiosity or fear. Fear-driven actions always cost you internally. Calm certainty requires restraint. Often the strongest move is no move at all. Silence, when it comes from composure, is not weakness. It's signal control. Understand this deeply. Jealousy provocation is not about making you jealous. It's about seeing whether your emotional state is self-regulated or externally regulated. When you prove, through calm, consistent behavior, that your internal stability does not fluctuate with perceived competition, the dynamic dissolves. There is nothing to push against, nothing to exploit. This is why Stoic discipline is so effective here. It trains you to return to first principles. What is in your control and what is not? Your attention is in your control. Your reactions are in your control. Other people's actions, histories, and choices are not. Lived by this daily reflection. You should too. Each night review where you reacted unnecessarily, not to shame yourself, to sharpen yourself. Here's another practical exercise: emotional fasting. For one day at a time, commit to not feeding jealous thoughts. When they arise, you don't indulge them, you don't wrestle them, you let them pass unfed. Thoughts starved of attention weaken quickly. Over time, your mind becomes quieter, cleaner, more disciplined. The ultimate truth is this: jealousy provocation only works on a man who believes his value is conditional. Conditional on being chosen, conditional on being preferred, conditional on being unmatched. The Stoics rejected conditional self-worth entirely. Seneca wrote, "He is most powerful who has power over himself." When you internalize that, no external comparison can destabilize you. So take this seriously. Not with tension, but with commitment. Train your awareness, discipline your reactions, anchor your self-worth internally. You don't need to confront mind games, you transcend them. And when you do, something remarkable happens. Respect replaces testing. Calm replaces chaos. And you move through interactions with a quiet authority that doesn't need to announce itself. This is your work now. Practice it daily. Guard your inner world. And remember, nothing external can disturb you without your consent. Number 4, testing boundaries repeatedly. One of the most misunderstood dynamics you'll ever face is repeated boundary testing. Not because it's aggressive, but because it's subtle. It doesn't arrive as a confrontation. It arrives as small pressures, quiet pushes, tiny moments that ask a single question again and again. Will you hold your ground, or will you move yourself to keep the peace? And the moment you start adjusting yourself to avoid tension, you teach the other person exactly where the line really is, because it's no longer where you said it was. It's where you abandoned it. You need to understand this clearly. Boundaries aren't respected because you explain them well. They're respected because you enforce them calmly and consistently. Warned, if you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your own judgment about it. Boundary testing only works when it stirs you internally, when it triggers the urge to justify, soften, or negotiate your limits. The test isn't about the boundary itself. It's about your emotional steadiness when that boundary is touched. Most men fail here not because they lack strength, but because they confuse kindness with flexibility. They think holding the line means being harsh, cold, or dominant. It doesn't. Real boundaries are quiet. They don't argue, they don't escalate, they don't repeat themselves endlessly. They simply remain where they are. When you feel the impulse to explain why your boundary exists, pause. That impulse is usually fear. fear of disapproval, fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood. And fear is always readable. Epictetus said, "If you wish to be invincible, make sure that no one can hurt you by what you choose to tolerate." Read that again. What you tolerate trains others how to treat you. Repeated testing happens when your limits feel negotiable. Not verbally negotiable, emotionally negotiable. When your tone changes, when your posture shifts, when your certainty wavers, you don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to threaten consequences. You need congruence, the same response, the same calm every time. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Boundary testing is not disrespect by default. It's assessment. It's an unconscious search for structure. And when structure is absent, chaos fills the gap. When you don't hold the frame, someone else will try to bend it. That's why reacting emotionally makes things worse. The moment you defend your boundary with frustration or intensity, you signal insecurity. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." Bravery here isn't confrontation. It's composure. It's the ability to say no without tightening your chest or speeding up your words. You build this composure by deciding, before the moment arrives, what you will and will not move on. Boundaries that are improvised collapse under pressure. Boundaries that are pre-decided hold. So take action now. Write down 3 non-negotiables in your life. Not rules for others, standards for yourself. Then commit to honoring them without commentary. No speeches. No emotional displays. Just alignment between what you say and what you do. Another habit you must adopt is response minimalism. When a boundary is tested, less is more. Overcommunication invites negotiation. Calm repetition ends it. Not repetition with irritation, repetition with neutrality. Reminded himself, be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it. That image matters. The cliff doesn't chase the waves away. It doesn't explain itself to the ocean. It simply remains unmoved. This is where most men slip. They want the other person to understand. But respect doesn't require understanding. It requires consistency. When you stop trying to be understood and start being embodied, something shifts. Testing slows. Then it stops. Because there's no reward in pushing against something that doesn't budge or react. You also need to train emotional non-reactivity. Not numbness, not detachment, non-reactivity. When a boundary is tested, notice the physical sensation that arises, the tightening, the heat, the urge to correct or appease. Sit with it, breathe, let it pass before you respond. This is Stoic discipline in practice. Epictetus taught, it is not events that disturb people, it is their judgments about them. Change the judgment and the test loses power. A powerful exercise is delayed response training. When you feel pressured to answer immediately, don't. Take a breath. Take 2. Respond only once your body has settled. This rewires your nervous system to associate boundaries with calm instead of stress. Another practice, silence tolerance. Allow silence after you state a boundary. Don't fill it. Don't rescue the moment. Silence is not weakness, it's stability. Understand this deeply. People push where they feel movement. They stop pushing where they feel stillness. Dominance invites challenge. Neediness invites exploitation. Calm certainty invites respect. You don't have to be rigid, you just have to be rooted. Seneca said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity." Boundary testing is adversity. It's the training ground. Each time you hold steady, you strengthen yourself. So stop negotiating with discomfort. Stop trading your standards for short-term peace. Peace that costs self-respect is always temporary. When you honor your boundaries without drama, without apology, without aggression, you send a clear signal, not of control, but of self-mastery. And self-mastery ends mind games because there's nothing left to play with. Start today, decide your limits, practice calm enforcement, reduce explanations, breathe through pressure, let consistency do the work. As wrote, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Dye yours with steadiness. And watch how the tests fade, not because you fought them, but because you outgrew them. Number 5. Withholding validation. Withholding validation works because it presses on a very old human reflex, the desire to be seen, approved, and affirmed. And if you're not careful, that reflex quietly takes the steering wheel. You start leaning forward. You start doing more, saying more, offering more. Not because you genuinely want to, but because a part of you is trying to earn something that used to feel freely available. That's the trap. And the moment validation becomes something you chase instead of something you're indifferent to, your power begins to leak. This isn't about blame or villainy. It's about awareness. Stoic philosophy never framed human behavior as good or evil, only as conditioned or unexamined. Epictetus said, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the view which they take of them." Validation only has power over you if you believe you need it to stay balanced. The problem isn't that validation is. The problem is that you were relying on it in the first place. When validation disappears, what often surfaces is restlessness. You feel an urge to fix the silence, to restore the warmth, to re-establish the emotional rhythm. That urge is information. It's showing you where you've outsourced your self-worth. And the Stoics would tell you very directly that anything you don't control but depend on will eventually control you. Warned himself daily, if you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your own judgment about it. Read that again. Slowly, withholding validation only works on men who judge themselves through someone else's response. Here's the shift you need to make. Validation is not oxygen. You don't suffocate without it. You breathe just fine when you stop waiting for permission to feel solid. The calm man doesn't scramble when approval is delayed. He doesn't interpret silence as a verdict. He doesn't rush to perform emotionally. He stays exactly where he is, grounded, observant, unmoved. The reason withholding validation becomes a mind game is because it creates imbalance. One person waits, the other person watches, and the moment you start adjusting your behavior to restore approval, the balance tilts. Respect quietly slips away, not because you did something wrong, but because you communicated need. Seneca put it plainly, "He who needs nothing is invincible." That isn't poetry, it's strategy. Emotional independence is the ultimate disruption to any manipulation dynamic. So what do you do instead? You stop reacting to absence. You stop filling gaps that were never yours to fill. You let people experience the natural consequences of their emotional packing, without resentment, without punishment, without commentary. This isn't withdrawal, it's composure. You don't chase warmth. You don't punish coldness. You remain steady regardless of temperature. And steadiness is unsettling to anyone who expects you to wobble. This requires practice, because your nervous system may be trained to equate validation with safety. That's normal, but it's also trainable. Start with this exercise. When validation doesn't come, do nothing. Literally nothing. No internal narratives, no emotional compensation, no silent bargaining. Sit with the discomfort and watch it rise and fall. This is Stoic training in real time. You're teaching yourself that emotional equilibrium is internal, not negotiated. Another discipline to adopt is deliberate self-approval. Not arrogance, not affirmation rituals, just honest acknowledgement. When you act in alignment with your values, recognize it internally without broadcasting it. Wrote, be satisfied with even the smallest progress. You don't need applause to know you're moving correctly. The more you reinforce that internally, the less leverage anyone has over you externally. You also need to clean up your motives. Ask yourself, brutally, whether you're giving, saying, or offering things with an expectation attached. Expectation is where manipulation hooks in. When you give freely, you're calm. When you give to get, you're tense. That tension is visible even when you think it is. Calm men don't keep score. And because they don't keep score, there's nothing to withhold that destabilizes them. Here's another practical exercise. Reduce reassurance-seeking behavior. Cut it by half this week. No fishing. No subtle bids for approval. No emotional check-ins designed to confirm standing. Watch what happens internally. You'll feel quieter, stronger, more centered. That's not distance, that's dignity. Understand this deeply. Withholding validation only creates obsession in men who doubt their own worth. When you stop outsourcing your sense of value, the entire dynamic collapses. There's no tension to exploit, no hunger to stimulate, no imbalance to manage. You're not cold, you're complete. And completeness is deeply attractive because it doesn't ask, it invites. Epictetus offered one of the most important reminders you can carry into this. Seek not that events should happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do happen, and your life will go well. When validation flows, receive it lightly. When it doesn't, remain unchanged. That neutrality is power, quiet power, the kind that doesn't react, doesn't chase, and doesn't need to win. So take this seriously, not as theory, as training. Notice when approval affects your mood. Interrupt the impulse to correct it. Strengthen your inner approval loop. Let others do what they do without rushing to respond. The moment you stop needing validation is the moment it stops being used against you. And that's when respect, real respect, has space to grow. Number 6, playing the victim. One of the most subtle mind games you'll ever encounter doesn't look like power at all. It looks like fragility. It looks like hurt. It looks like someone wronged by the world. And if you're not grounded, not disciplined, not aware of your own emotional reflexes, you'll rush in not out of strength but out of guilt. That's how playing the victim works. It doesn't demand, it implores. It does confront. It collapses. And the trap is simple. If you react emotionally instead of consciously, you surrender your frame without even realizing it. This dynamic feeds on your instinct to fix, soothe, and explain. You feel the pull to restore balance, to relieve tension, to make things right, even when nothing concrete has been done wrong. And the moment you accept responsibility for emotions that aren't yours to carry, the power quietly shifts, not through force, through emotional leverage. Epictetus warned, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer. He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone." That mindset matters here. You are not obligated to absorb every emotional narrative placed in front of you. Playing the victim often disguises itself as vulnerability, but there's a difference you must learn to feel, not intellectualize. Genuine vulnerability owns itself. It doesn't outsource responsibility. Victimhood, on the other hand, subtly assigns blame while appearing powerless. It communicates, "You did this to me, the world did this to me, now you must compensate." And if you respond by over-apologizing, over-explaining, or overcorrecting, you reinforce the pattern. Not because you're kind, but because you're reactive. The Stoics were ruthless about this. Wrote, "Choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been." That doesn't mean dismissing emotions. It means refusing to let emotions become instruments of control. You can acknowledge feelings without surrendering your center. You can listen without accepting blame that isn't yours. And the moment you learn that distinction, this mind game loses its effectiveness. What makes this tactic so powerful is that it exploits your desire to be seen as good, fair, and understanding. You don't want to be the villain. You don't want to be cold. So you bend, you soften your boundaries, you abandon your clarity, and slowly you train yourself to walk on emotional eggshells. That's the cost. Not conflict, but self-betrayal. Seneca warned, "He who suffers before it is necessary, suffers more than is necessary." When you internalize emotional distress that doesn't belong to you, that's exactly what you're doing. Here's the shift you need to make, starting now. Stop responding to emotional displays with emotional urgency. Replace it with calm acknowledgement, presence without absorption, Compassion without capitulation. You don't need to argue with victimhood. You don't need to invalidate it. You simply refuse to be moved by it. Calm is your shield. Consistency is your boundary. And boundaries are what dissolve manipulation, not confrontation. This requires discipline. You must train yourself to pause when guilt is triggered. Guilt is the hook. When you feel it rise, don't act. Observe it. Ask yourself a single grounding question. What am I actually responsible for here? Not what feels uncomfortable, not what might smooth things over. What is truly yours? Most of the time, the answer is far less than your emotions initially suggest. Epictetus put it plainly: make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. Other people's emotional reactions are not in your power. You also need to stop over-verbalizing your intentions. When you explain yourself excessively in response to victim narratives, you're seeking absolution. You're trying to clear your name in a court that never intended to be fair. Calm certainty doesn't defend itself endlessly. It states, it listens, and it holds its ground. Silence here is not avoidance, it's strength. Silence communicates that you're not shaken by emotional pressure. A practical exercise for you. For the next 7 days, remove one automatic apology that isn't truly warranted. Not rudeness, not accountability, but unnecessary apology driven by discomfort. Each time you resist that impulse, you reclaim authority over your emotional posture. Another practice: journal moments where you felt compelled to fix someone's feelings. Don't judge them, just observe patterns. Awareness precedes freedom. You should also train emotional neutrality. This doesn't mean coldness, it means steadiness. Sit quietly for 5 minutes a day and replay emotionally charged situations in your mind, not to relive them but to practice holding calm while imagining them. This mental rehearsal strengthens your nervous system. When the real moment comes, you'll be less likely to react impulsively. Practice this constantly. He reminded himself, the mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. Even emotional pressure can become training. Understand this deeply. Respect is not earned by self-sacrifice through guilt. It's earned through emotional clarity. When you don't crumble under victimhood, when you remain composed and fair without overcompensating, the dynamic resets. The game ends, not dramatically, quietly, because manipulation needs emotional volatility to survive. Calm starves it. This doesn't make you harsh, it makes you grounded. You can still be empathetic, you can still listen, but you no longer confuse empathy with responsibility. That distinction is everything. Seneca wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." This is your proving ground, not against others, but against your own reflex to abandon yourself for emotional peace. So take this as a call to action. Slow down your reactions, question guilt, practice stillness, strengthen boundaries without speeches. Let your calm be unmovable. When you stop rewarding victimhood with emotional surrender, it stops being used around you. And in its place, something far more powerful emerges: respect rooted in self-mastery. That is Stoic strength, quiet, disciplined, unshakable. Number 7, triangulation, using other men. Triangulation is subtle, and that's why it works, until you learn to see it. It doesn't arrive as a threat. It arrives as a comparison that wasn't asked for, a name dropped casually, a presence implied rather than stated. The moment you feel a quiet pressure to compete, to prove, to reclaim ground that was never actually lost, you're already standing inside the triangle. And here's the Stoic truth you need to internalize early. The instant you accept a competition you didn't choose, you surrender your center. This mind game isn't about another man. It's about your reaction. That's the part you must train yourself to notice. Epictetus was blunt about this when he said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." Triangulation only has power if it disturbs you. if it makes you speed up, puff up, or tighten emotionally. The moment you feel your behavior change because of an implied rival, the dynamic shifts, and not in your favor. Most men respond in one of two ways, both predictable. They either lean into dominance, subtly trying to outshine, assert, or one-up, or they lean into approval, becoming more agreeable, more available, more eager to secure reassurance. Different expressions, same root: insecurity. And insecurity is readable even when you think you're hiding it well. Calm awareness dissolves triangulation instantly, not because you confront it, but because you refuse to orbit it. Here, what matters? Triangulation feeds on emotional displacement. Attention is pulled away from the present moment and redirected toward imagined competition. You stop being grounded in your own conduct and start measuring yourself against an external reference. Warned against this mental habit repeatedly. Do not waste what remains of your life in thoughts about others. When another man becomes the silent yardstick, you're no longer leading your own frame. You're reacting inside someone else. The Stoic response is never confrontation and never compliance. It's indifference rooted in self-respect, not apathy, not coldness. Indifference that comes from knowing your value is not comparative. When you stop evaluating yourself on a sliding scale of rivals, triangulation collapses. There's no tension to harvest, no reaction to reward, no emotional spike to manipulate. This is where action begins for you. The first habit to adopt is internal neutrality. When a comparison is introduced, directly or indirectly, observe what happens inside you before you do anything else. Notice the tightening, the urge to respond, the impulse to reposition yourself. Then do nothing, just breathe. Wrote, the best answer to anger is silence. Silence here isn't avoidance, it's composure. You're teaching your nervous system that nothing is at stake unless you decide it is. Another critical habit is to stop performing under imagined observation. Triangulation works because it creates an invisible audience. You begin acting as if you're being judged against someone else. That's the trap. Seneca cautioned, "He who lives to please others will never be at peace." The moment you sense yourself adjusting behavior to outperform or outlast a phantom competitor, reset. Return to your baseline. Speak as you would have spoken. Move as you would have moved. This consistency is disarming. You must also train non-reactivity as a discipline. Not passivity, discipline. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." Decide in advance that you do not compete for attention that is not freely given. Decide that your worth does not rise or fall based on who else is mentioned. Predecision removes hesitation. When the moment comes, you do scramble. You already know who you are. A practical exercise for this is emotional labeling. When triangulation energy appears, name it silently. Comparison, provocation, test. Numbing creates distance. Distance restores control. Another exercise is posture of sufficiency. Sit or stand and feel the physical sensation of not needing anything in that moment. No outcome, no reassurance, just this may feel unfamiliar at first. That's good. Growth often does. Understand this deeply. Triangulation is a test of self-possession, not attractiveness. The man who reacts proves he is externally governed. The man who remains steady proves something far more compelling: inner authority. Reminded himself daily, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Extend that rule to emotional reactions. If a response isn't aligned with your values, don't give it energy. You should also practice outcome independence. This doesn't mean you don't care. It means you don't cling. The moment you need to win against another man, you've already lost leverage over yourself. Seneca wrote, "To wish to be well is a part of becoming well. Wish instead to be steady, to be self-directed, to be unmoved by games that rely on agitation." One more exercise to integrate: deliberate detachment from comparison triggers. When your mind starts running scenarios, rankings, or imagined outcomes, gently bring it back to the present. What can you control right now? Your tone, your pace, your choices, that's it. And that's enough. The Stoics were relentless about this boundary for a reason. It's where freedom lives. Here's the paradox you must accept. When you refuse to compete, you become uncontestable. Not because you dominate, but because you no longer play the game. Triangulation only works on men who believe attention is scarce and must be secured. When you operate from abundance of self, the tactic loses oxygen. So take this seriously, not as a trick to outmaneuver, but as a standard to live by. Train calm, train awareness, train restraint. Let others introduce comparisons if they wish. You don't have to step into them. As said, stand firm like a rocky promontory against which the waves continually break. The waves will come. Your job is not to fight them. Your job is to remain unmoved. That is how triangulation ends. Not with confrontation, not with cleverness, but with quiet self-mastery. Number 8. Moving goalposts. Nothing is ever enough. There's a quiet exhaustion that sets in when nothing you do ever seems to land. You adjust, you improve, you give more effort, more patience, more restraint. And still, the finish line keeps sliding further away. That's the essence of moving goalposts. Not open conflict, not direct rejection, just a subtle draining sense that almost is your permanent position. And if you don't recognize this pattern early, it can slowly train you to doubt your own adequacy. The Stoics warned against this kind of inner erosion, not because other people are malicious, but because humans often test boundaries unconsciously. Wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." Read that again. The danger of moving goalposts isn't the behavior itself. It's what happens inside you when you accept endless evaluation as normal. You start living in reaction mode. You stop acting from principle and start acting from anticipation. That's where self-respect quietly leaks out. What makes this mind game so effective is that it disguises itself as growth. There's always a new condition, a new standard, a new almost there. And if you're not careful, you begin chasing a moving target that was never meant to be reached, not because you're failing, but because the target isn't real. It exists to keep you adjusting, accommodating, proving. Seneca warned, "He who is always anxious to please others will never find peace." When peace disappears, clarity follows. You need to understand something deeply. Effort without internal limits turns into self-abandonment. Improvement is healthy when it's self-directed. It becomes corrosive when it's driven by the fear of falling short for someone else. Moving goalposts thrive on that fear, on your willingness to keep trying just one more time. Calm awareness breaks the cycle. The Stoic response is not confrontation fueled by emotion. It's grounded refusal to participate in endless qualification. Epictetus said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation." When standards keep shifting, the real question is what's being asked of you. It's why you keep agreeing to renegotiate your worth. So here's your first shift in habit. Stop measuring yourself by fluctuating expectations. Decide internally what enough looks like for you, not in arrogance, in alignment. When your actions match your values, you are complete. No external approval can add to that. No shifting standard can subtract from it unless you allow it. This doesn't mean becoming rigid or dismissive. It means becoming anchored. You listen, you observe, but you don't scramble. You don't overcorrect every time the criteria change. You remain steady. Reminded himself, stand straight, not held straight. That line matters here. You're not resisting pressure with force. You're simply refusing to bend your spine for endless validation. A powerful daily exercise is internal closure. At the end of each day, ask yourself one question. Did I act in accordance with my own standards today? not someone else's mood, not someone else's shifting expectations. Yours. Write the answer down. This trains your mind to look inward for completion instead of outward for permission. Another practice is pause discipline. When you sense a new condition being introduced, don't react immediately. Take a breath. Let the moment sit. Silence creates space, and space reveals patterns. You don't need to accuse. You don't need to explain. Often, calm non-engagement says more than words ever could. Here, where motivation comes in, you must be willing to disappoint expectations that are unreasonable. That's not cruelty. That's self-respect. Seneca wrote, "No one can live happily who has regard to himself alone and transforms everything into a question of his own utility." Flip that inward. No one can live calmly who constantly transforms himself to meet endlessly changing demands. You're allowed to stop trying to earn rest. You're allowed to stop auditioning. You're allowed to decide that your effort has a limit, and that limit is not weakness, it's wisdom. Practice this. Choose one area of your life where you notice constant self-adjustment. For 1 week, stop adjusting. Maintain your standard. Observe what happens internally. The discomfort you feel is not danger. It's withdrawal from dependency. Sit with it. Let it teach you. Remember, moving goalposts only work when you keep running. The moment you stop chasing and start standing, the game loses its power. Not with drama, not with anger, with calm finality. As wrote, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Dye yours with steadiness, with limits, with self-respect. When you no longer accept never enough as a story about you, the need to prove dissolves. And what remains is something far more powerful than approval, inner authority. Before you go, remember this: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. That's reminding you of the core truth behind everything you just learned. These mind games only work on men who react emotionally, who chase clarity from confusion, who seek validation instead of self-respect. The moment you stop reacting, the moment you choose awareness over impulse, the game collapses. Not because you confronted it, but because you rose above it. Recognizing these patterns isn't about resentment or control. It's about clarity. It's about knowing when to step forward with confidence and when to step back with dignity. When you master this, you stop being manipulated by uncertainty, mixed signals, or emotional pressure. You become calm, grounded, unshakable. And here's the truth most men never hear. The strongest position is not pursuit or withdrawal, it's self-command. If this video gave you clarity, don't let it end here. Watch it again. Let the patterns sink in, observe more, react less. Apply what you've learned in silence. If you found value in this, like the video, subscribe for more Stoic wisdom, and share it with a man who needs to hear this. Because the man who understands the game is no longer playing it.